This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Isn't it about time for somebody's favorite radio program?
Yeah!
97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
Now, live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
A happy hour Friday starts now on the Sports Bash Live. 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SB Live. What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning is producing today's show. You out there, happy hour Friday. What are you having today, man? We're all going to need an extra little something after the injuries in the Phillies game last night. Not good news. Bryce Harper. The sound of it, not good. Bryce Harper suffered a left hamstring injury last night on the final play of the game. And what he said after the game was not good. Rob Thompson, let's hear what he has to say on the injury to Bryce Harper, as he basically broke it down, and it didn't sound good. We'll get the audio from Harper coming up later on in the show. We'll hear from that. But Rob Thompson last night, he kind of, he said, it's a hamstring, and we'll get more information today. That's code word for I really don't want to talk about this right now. We know when Harper was asked about it last night, he did not sound very optimistic. We just saw the injury to Trey Turner, and it kept him out a while. And I would imagine you're going to see a similar situation with Bryce Harper here. Just because Bryce Harper's the best player or one of the best players in the league, and he's a MVP candidate, that doesn't mean that you heal faster or things, go better for you. When you have a hamstring problem, I have to anticipate we're talking about a 6 to 8 week type of injury here, if not longer, the way that he pulled up. He pulled up, if anybody's ever had a hamstring problem, if anybody has ever had that hamstring where you're running and nothing seems to be bothering you, and then bam, it feels like somebody took a shotgun and fired it right at your hamstring. And a lot of times, right off the bat, right away, something ain't right. I think Bryce Harper knew right away last night that something wasn't right. I think you could see it in his face. I think you can hear it in his voice. And I think it's going to be a long journey back for him. I hope I'm wrong. But I have to tell you, I don't feel great about what I saw last night. I didn't feel great about what I saw from the team last night. They really did not play. They got off to a good start. You're winning the game. You feel pretty good. Zach Wheeler's on the mound. And, Wheeler's a guy that you obviously trust more than anybody else, generally. And let's get into the game from last night, because they lose 7-4, but you lose Harper, so that kind of overshadows everything. As Bryce Harper limps off the field, we forget that also Kyle Schwarber limped off the field earlier in the game. So you have both those guys getting hurt. Real Muto is now out. But there was other things that happened in that game last night that, we got to dive into a little bit. The Phillies built a 3-0 lead early in that game. Of course, the RBI by Harper, who has a 12-game hitting streak right now and might be stuck at 12 for a while. He also got chosen to be in the All-Star game as a starter. That probably not going to happen right now. What? I like how people talk to me like I can hear them.
So he was announced as a finalist for the starter role.
All right, he's going to be the starter. Come on.
Well, you want to be accurate? Or do you want
No,
to be
I don't care about
subjective?
him being a finalist for the thing. He's about 2 million votes ahead of the next guy. But he was chosen for the All-Star game. Actually, no. It says right here, he has been chosen as an All-Star, his 7th as the starter. He was the leading vote getter in the balloting. The balloting has ended.
No, there's another round of outing that starts this weekend. That's what the MLB.com article said.
Yeah, good for you. He's going to be the starter. You want to bet me on that one?
I'm not going to bet you on it. I know he's going to
Everybody,
be the starter.
you should see the anger in Josh's face right now. He is so angry that he is like having to explain himself. Bryce Harper will be the starter, and he is not going to play in the All-Star game. So guess what? You're going to win because you should have taken the bet. See, you're a fool. You see, I was trying to see if Josh was good enough, smart enough to untangle the web to say, I will take that bet because Harper will not be healthy enough to start. But he couldn't get the anger out of his eyes that he had, that he basically had a chance to win free money, and he said the bag was too heavy.
No, I was too concerned about seeing if I misread the article I read last night.
This article here just says that he's been chosen as the starter for the 7th time. So maybe they're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. I have no care who's wrong. Bryce Harper's not playing in that game. I think we can all probably agree. Now, I would be pretty shocked if we get news in about a half hour today that says, hey, it's just something minor and that he's not on the IL. I would imagine an IL stint's coming up here, and I'm going to guess 6 to 8 weeks.
I mean, you can only hope that it's good news, but I mean, if you listen to the way he talked about it last night, he didn't sound like he had any certainty when he'll be back.
No, you saw it in his face. You saw it in his face. You heard it in his voice that this was something that he knows is going to have him on the sideline for a while. I mean, there's two ways around it. A hamstring injury is one of the worst things that you can have to deal with. And there is no timetable generally. And sometimes even when the timetable says, hey, you feel like you're ready. Trey Turner, I think, was feeling like he was ready, and then he had a little bit of a setback. He was trying to, get to that point, and then, man, you had that slight little twinge in your hamstring, and you're like, you don't want that feeling again. Anybody who has a hamstring problem, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you just don't want that feeling again. And it's not a feeling like when you break a bone or anything. It is this pull and this tightness that you can't even describe. And I don't want it. I had it happen before, and I never want it again, which is, it's in your mind. It's constantly in your mind that, hey, even if I want to like run around and chase my nephew around, I don't want to do that because I'm afraid of that feeling coming back. Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, possibly Schwarber, who has a groin problem possibly now. I don't know what Schwarber's, the groin thing is a little different sometimes than the hamstring problem, but let's kind of dive into what happened in the game last night because I think there's a few things here that can be discussed. Wheeler is kind of cruising along in the game, right? And he's into the 7th inning. He does throw 115 pitches, and I know in the world we live in today, people are like aghast by the fact that someone could go that far. But my God, he threw 115 pitches, but it's that 7th inning where everything kind of goes awry for him. And he's cruising along to that point, and it's one of those things where, like, if he didn't start the 7th inning, people would have been like, well, how come you took him out of the game? And then the other side says, how could you leave him out there at 115 pitches? Like, he's your ace pitcher, and he's cruising along through 6 innings. He hasn't given up a run. Like, all of a sudden, you're going to be like, hey, you know what? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in that situation. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where, if you leave him out there and he gives up runs, you left him out too long.
Right.
And if you take him out and he hasn't given up any runs, you're saying, why'd you take him out?
Right. So at some point, now you're just going off of feel of the game and discretion to say, as the team, Rob Thompson turning to the pitching coach saying, how do you think? How do I feel? They have a conversation. They kind of just have to feel it out as they go along. And
not to mention, he had 2 outs right off the bat, if my memory serves, right?
Well, also, if the umpire wasn't such an imbecile and made the horrible call they did, Wheeler would have been out of that inning. And that's why Wheeler stared at him as he walked off the field. Wheeler gave him the stare down like, dude, I would be out of this inning if it wasn't for you. And then you could argue if it wasn't for the umpire making that horrible call on the pitch that should have been, it was just so bad.
Well, the first guy flew out, right?
Right.
And then the second guy grounded out. So he gets 2 outs. So he's got 2 outs in the 7th. And then he gives up the single. And then after that, there was another single. And then they brought Strahm in the game.
Right. But the single didn't have to happen if the umpire would have just called the strike.
Mm-hmm.
It was a strike, between what's the old thing, Mike, between the elbow and the knee is the measurement, right?
Yeah, it was right on that left, borderline there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a borderline pitch. He calls it a ball. And then the next pitch is a strike. He fouls one off and then he singles. So now he's on. And then the next guy hits a single.
Right, he gets on. So now you're bringing in Strahm, who's a 0.84 ERA. On paper, it looks like the right move.
Right, but that's the spot there. So he's got 2 outs now in the 7th. And he's had 115 pitches. And the complaint is, why did you leave him out there for 115 pitches? As if, he got 2 outs and was cruising along and, here's the button that you had to hit there, to make sure that you get him out of the game. I saw people complaining about that last night. I'm like, really? I mean, come on, dude. It's the Marlins, number 1. It's the worst team and lineup, period. You got your 8th pitcher out there. He's cruising along with 2 outs in the 7th inning.
Right.
Let him finish the inning. And he doesn't get the job done. The umpire, like you said, makes a tight call. They end up getting a single, then another single. So, okay, fine. Get him out of the game. There's 2 outs, and you bring in a guy who has been lights out this year, and he wasn't lights out last night.
Yeah, it's crazy that the 2 of your best bullpen pitchers this year, Strahm and Hoffman, were the guys who couldn't get the job done last night. They have been so good all year, and they both just happened to have a bad night at the exact same time.
Yeah, I mean, Strahm was not sharp last night. He hits Jazz Chisholm with a pitch when he comes in the game. So now you load the bases up, and then he gives up that double. And the next thing you know, the game's tied, and then Bell, who always seems to kill the Phillies. He's such a Phillies killer. He doubles, and then, next thing you know, you're losing. So, I don't think that it was miserably managed in that situation. I just think it was guys who, by the way, you generally count on. Wheeler and Strahm, who kind of let you down last night. And then, as you just said, Hoffman comes in and gives up a homer to Berger. First pitch swinging, he hits a bomb. And the next thing you know, you're down 5-4, and Hoffman couldn't shake that off. He gives up a double, and then they score again. And the Phillies, after that, the Schwarber injury and then the Harper injury kind of take over. So, looking back at that game last night, I don't know that they lost because it was a poorly managed game. I think they lost the game on a night where some of your key guys just weren't sharp. Well, I'll take that back. Wheeler was sharp for 6 2/3.
Right, Wheeler was doing his job. The problem was early in the game, you should have had more than a couple runs against one of the Marlins' worst starting pitchers. I had to look it up. I had to make sure I had the number right. They were 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position, Mike. They had multiple times last night where they had guys on base to score runs in the first inning, in the third inning, in the fourth inning, and they walked away with just a measly 1 run each time. So it's if you're moving along and you should have had more runs, and you only have 3 runs against one of the Marlins' worst pitchers, maybe the game looks a little differently when you get to the 7th inning and you tell Wheeler, we don't need to pull you out of the game because we have a 5 or 6 run lead.
Well, I would say this, obviously the Marlins are not a good team, and you're going to face much better teams. You're going to have to win games with 4 runs, and now, and I bring this up because now, with Harper potentially out and maybe Schwarber out too, and Realmuto already out, you're going to have to find creative ways to score more runs. Look, do you hit the panic button because these guys are potentially out? You got an 8-game lead. Right? I think it's still 8 games. I know, I think the Braves lost to, I think they're playing the White Sox. I think they lost to the White Sox.
They did lose last night.
So you're up by 8 games right now. Now, when you lost Trey Turner, you ended up extending your lead to about 10 games at one point. So you have an 8-game cushion that you're going to have to try to hold while Harper, I would imagine, now there's nothing official yet. We should hear something here in about 15 minutes. we should hear something about how long he might be out for. But the one thing we know is you got an 8-game lead, and this team is built around your pitching. So what could the team look like now? I'm going to give you, in my mind, what the team's going to end up looking like here. Let's say Harper's out for an elongated period of time, okay? I would say Alec Bohm becomes your everyday first baseman.
You would go with Bohm.
I think Bohm will play first base every day.
Just to have the consistency?
Well, because now you play Sosa at third base.
Okay.
So it gets Sosa back into the lineup. You could play Merrifield at third every now and then. So Bohm just slides over to first.
So you're going with the consistency to say, look.
Well, who else am I going with?
Well, for example, Cody Clemens is going to be eligible to come back. So what if you brought him back up to play first base?
Yeah, I guess he's in the mix a little bit. But I would think that you would value Sosa playing more at third base than having Clemens playing first base.
To me, I think the argument would be the way you described. Get Bohm at first, but Sosa at third, and that way those guys are consistently in those spots every day. You don't have to worry about moving guys around. I think there's value in that. I just think that Clemens was hitting well before he got injured.
The question will be, all right, now you're missing potentially your leadoff hitter.
Yep.
And your 3-hitter.
Correct.
So, and Real Lamuto's not here either until after the All-Star break.
Yep.
So there's a guy who was hitting, well, he was hitting 4, then he was at 2 when Turner went out, and I would imagine would be at 5. So you need a new leadoff guy. So the question is, do you go to Trey Turner?
Yes. I would go.
Or do you keep him where he's been very good all season long in the 2-hole?
I would at least give him a few days at leadoff hitter to see what it looks like. I mean, you could go the classic baseball lineup now that you have these injuries, the quote-unquote classic lineup. You can go Turner, Stott, Bohm, Castellanos, Marsh. That could be your 1 through 5 now.
Yeah, Turner, Stott. Now, Stott hasn't been playing every single day.
Right.
But I would imagine, for the most part, he'll be in that. And then you do have Sosa and Merrifield that I guess you would start to see playing some more third base.
Right.
And Merrifield will probably be playing left field against left-handed pitching.
Right. And then I guess Dahl is here till further notice. He's still not hitting well.
Yeah.
That was a bad call by me.
Yeah. I told you that.
I'm admitting it.
So that's where we are there. Trying to think. And is there a guy that I'm missing? Because Castellanos, the other thing, I was thinking about is they did hit Castellanos in the 2-hole while Turner was out.
That was so bad.
It was bad. Do they do that?
No. You put him in the 4-hole and just tell Castellanos
So Bohm moves up to the 3 spot.
That's what I would do. Yeah. I would put Bohm at 3.
Yeah, I agree. I think your lineup, Turner, Stott, Bohm, Castellanos, is probably what you'll see. And then I guess the days that Marsh plays, he probably hits 5th.
Right, and then maybe like Sosa 6 kind of situation. And then I guess if Stubbs is catching, he would be 7 or 8. It depends on where Merrifield is. Like, are you playing Marsh in left and Pache in center still? Or because if Schwarber and Harper go on the DL, do you call Rojas
All right, so
up?
we got our first news from Matt Gelb. Harper and Schwarber are both going on the injured list. But sources have said they both have avoided significant injuries. Yeah, but you know what? I don't know. How would you describe Trey Turner? Was that a significant injury? No.
But he missed 6 weeks.
But he missed 6 weeks.
So I'm assuming Harper's going to miss 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's not a significant injury where it's season ending. But, right? But he could possibly still be out for an extended period of time, just not season ending, which, I mean, obviously that's much better news than the alternative. But both of them going on the injured list adds to the story that we're talking about right now.
So now
you need a new lineup.
Right. So do you call up Rojas now? You'd be like, look, you've been doing a good job in the
Well,
minors.
that's a good question, too. Now you need 2 guys to come up. So do you bring Rojas right back up?
I would.
Clemens is going to be one of the guys that come back up.
I'm assuming so.
Is it Weston Wilson?
I'm out on Weston.
What about Buddy Kennedy?
Buddy Kennedy's interesting because of his positional versatility. CC very intrigued.
Okay. Well, we'll dive into it. Mike McGarry asked the question last night to Bryce Harper. Are you concerned? Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SB Live. How concerned should we be about Bryce Harper? He answered that question from Mike McGarry last night. Hear what he had to say. Coming up next on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Like I said, I haven't really felt anything like this before. So if I had something to go back on, I would, let you know.
That was Bryce Harper last night. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. How concerned should we be about Harper? Well, it looks like he's going on the injured list. For how long, we don't know. But let's get Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City's thoughts as we might have, Trey Turner was out, Real Muto was out. This team has had some adversity this year. But it felt like an ominous moment last night. I think it was you that even asked him how concerned. He's like, I don't know. I never felt anything like this. You could almost see it in his face that he knew he wasn't playing for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't me that asked that question. He said he's never had a soft tissue injury, so it's hard to compare or, what this feels like and how serious it might have been. I would expect the word is that these two guys, both Schwarber and Harper, are going on the injured list. However, the feeling I'm getting now, the vibe around Citizens Bank Park is the injuries are not as severe as they might have anticipated, and they might have dodged a couple of bullets here. So expect these guys to both go on the injured list, but also the expectation now is that they will be back relatively quickly. However, that comes with a grain of salt to me because you never know, especially with soft tissue injuries, especially with a groin, especially with a hamstring. You pull something while you're working back and a setback. But the feeling now is that the Phillies might have dodged some major bullets here. But, however, both guys are going to the injured list.
Yeah, Matt Gelb tweeted out a little while ago that Harper and Schwarber are both going on the injured list, but sources say they have avoided significant injuries. Now, when I read that, that's fine and dandy, but I don't know. Did you characterize Trey Turner as significant? Probably not, but he still missed 6 weeks. So you could be in that thing where when he says they've avoided significant, meaning maybe season-ending injuries, but both these guys could be out 6 to 8 weeks with the type of soft tissue injuries.
Yeah, to me, Mike, when it comes to injuries, and this is with any professional sports team, I when the guy's back, he's back. I think teams are giving you their best case scenario. But think about our kids, right? You bring a kid to the doctors, to the pediatrician with an ear infection. The pediatrician gives them some antibiotics and says it should clear up by Tuesday. Well, sometimes it clears up by Sunday, and sometimes it lingers until the following weekend. I mean, you just don't know. These things are hard to predict. So, I believe the Phillies got some good news today. But when it comes to injuries, when a player comes back, I believe it when I see them walk out there on the field.
Mike, obviously with those two out, you have key lineup questions. So let's start with Schwarber. He's been your leadoff guy for a while here. Do you turn to Trey Turner, who has been very comfortably in that number 2 hole, or do you go to a guy like Bryson Stott? How do you think this lineup will start to look with no Harper in the 3 hole? I would imagine Bohm goes over to play first, and then Sosa's playing third for a little while here. How do you have it in your head?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Number one, to me, the easiest thing to do is to just slide Trey Turner up a spot and let him take that leadoff spot. Now, The flip side is the other option is obviously Bryson Stott, who, as we talked about the other day, has not had a very good regular season so far at the plate. Maybe you shift him up there for a few games, hoping that gets him jump-started. He does have some speed, 18, 19, 20 stolen bases. Stott and Turner at the top of that lineup, that might be a nice combination, something to see, explore going forward. So I might do that for a couple of games, try Stott up there, see if he gets hot, and know that if he doesn't seize the job, you can always slide Turner up there to the top of the order. As far as, the first base situation, I can see Alec Bohm playing over there. I also think you're going to see Cody Clemens back, at least against right-handers, getting a lot of time at first base.
Yeah, Clemens. Now, let me get your thoughts on this. Would you bring Rojas back up, or do you think it's too soon to force him back up here? They're going to need two guys to come up and play. Clemens would likely be one. Would Rojas be the other one? You look at Buddy Kennedy, Weston Wilson. They got a couple major league guys playing down there. I mean, I saw the Iron Pigs lineup the other night. The first four guys are all kind of, major league veterans. You had Rojas, Kennedy hitting 2, Clemens hitting 3, Wilson hitting 4. So how would you pick that second guy?
Yeah, to me, I would bring back Rojas, right, and put him in center field, and then you have Marsh in left field there. Rojas has gone down to AAA, and he's hit the ball well. He's done what they wanted him to do. He's gotten some bunts down there. He's taken advantage of his speed. Maybe the trip down to AAA kind of motivates him, wakes him up a little bit, and he can come back and play the defense that he played last year. To me, he's the guy, and we'll find out in a bit what they're about to do here, but to me, he's a guy that I would bring back.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. And, obviously this is tough because you got no Real Muto, you got no Harper, and you got no Schwarber. Now, John Clark tweeted out just 10 minutes ago that hopefully he will miss a few weeks or so. I guess, when you're looking at all this, are you comparing this to Turner? I mean, you talked to Harper last night, and you could feel it and see it. It just sounded and felt like the way it went was, we're looking at a 6 to 8 week type of thing here. So when he says a few weeks, that sounds kind of like it's a little arbitrary.
Yeah, to me, it's not going to be Trey Turner, which is like 6 to weeks. If it all goes perfectly, it won't be Trey Turner, which was 6-7 weeks, and it won't be Brandon Marsh, which was 2 weeks, basically. It's going to be somewhere in the middle of that situation, which would be 3 to 4 weeks with the All-Star break, mixed in there. And that'll help both these guys and Realmuto and the pitchers get back, as you basically take a week off in 2 weeks and factor that in. So you're not going to be missing games during that stretch. So to me, when I look at the Harper injury and I'm hearing the reports and kind of reading the tea leaves, I see not as bad as Trey Turner, not as quick as Brandon Marsh.
Yeah, all right, Mike. We got the Phils last night. Let's quickly get into a couple things in the game last night. Wheeler, I've seen the one side. This was a no-win situation. You have the people that are complaining that he left Wheeler out there for 115 pitches, left him out there too long. But if they would have taken him out when he gave up no runs, they would have pulled him too early. What did you think of, and then he gets 2 outs in the 7th. He's cruising along, and then he turns it over to a guy in Strom who's been lights out. What do you make of that 7th inning?
Well, I just think it was a bad loss for last night. They haven't had too many of those this season. Strom and Hoffman have been excellent all season. They didn't have it last night. They gave it up. That's going to happen. Wheeler pitched well. That last at-bat, he thought he had the guy struck out. The umpire calls it a ball. Wheeler obviously not happy with the umpire leaving the field, not happy with the umpire in his post-game press conference saying the missed strike cost him 4 runs. I just think it was, a sloppy outing by the Phillies. It's going to happen during the course of the season, but we haven't exactly seen it so far this season.
Yeah, that's, I kind of mentioned it. Like, if you're going to a playoff game and Wheeler's getting you to the 7th inning, I think you're pretty happy with that. And then turning it over to Strom, the way he's pitched this year, I don't think anything that Thompson did last night you should be complaining about.
Yeah, no. I mean, let's face facts. 3 out. Phillies are up 3-0. Wheeler on the mound with the bullpen they have, 2 outs in the top of the 7th. They've got to win that game. It slipped away last night. Those things are going to happen in the course of a 162-game season, and unfortunately it happened for the Phillies last night. And then you compound it with the sloppy defensive play and the injuries, and it sort of sets up, probably the worst night of the season, basically, for them.
All right. obviously all these injuries, we start to now maybe intensify some of the trade thoughts. We already thought outfielders were going to be somebody. So some of the names that are out there, Jazz Chisholm, you saw him last night. Randy Arozarena really struggled. He's been much better in June. Always seems to be a playoff performer. Taylor Ward from the Angels. Tommy Pham, we saw him with the Diamondbacks. Lewis Robert Jr., his name keeps coming up. Any of them guys that you're making calls to now with the injury situation?
Well, I'm keeping it. And by the way, the Phillies just officially announced that both guys are going on the injured list. So that is official right now. They just announced that. To me, again, I'm keeping my eye on pitching right now.
Real quick on that. Well, did they announce who's replacing them yet or no? Clemens and Rojas. Josh told me Clemens and Rojas. There you go.
As we just talked about, so there you go.
Yep.
I'm going to keep my eye out not only for outfielders, not only for bullpen help, but also starting pitching. If one of the core four goes down, and by core four we mean Nola, Wheeler, Sanchez or Suarez, boy, then you got to go out and get a starting pitching. So I think the next couple of weeks are going to be very, very interesting. It's amazing how a 162-game season, you think things are going along swimmingly, and all of a sudden in one night or in the span of 3 innings, everything gets turned upside down.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point because you don't even think about the pitching because it's been so good. But with Turnbull going to be out an elongated period of time, I don't know that the Phillies wanted to rush Walker back. Michael Mercado now becomes an interesting figure here.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's 25 years old, a kind of cast off from the Tampa Bay Rays organization, but so is Christopher Sanchez. So we will see, he's going to get an opportunity here, probably start next Wednesday or Thursday in Chicago. He's going to get an opportunity to be that fifth starter, and we'll see where they go from there. So there's a lot of question marks kind of developing. We're going to see Whit Merrifield. Can he hit in the next 2 to 3 weeks? That's going to have to say on his future and who they go get at the trade deadline. Can Mercado fill that spot? That's going to have to say who they go at the trade deadline. How's the bullpen going to hold up? It's just interesting how these questions are presented to the Phillies. And, even though they have the best record in the National League, they're still a team with some issues.
And, Mike, I would say, the way they ended the year last year with Jake Cave at the plate, you looked at a team that simply wasn't deep enough, right? I mean, you just didn't have that depth on the bench. They brought in Merrifield. You have Sosa. They like Pache. Marchand has been an interesting. That's going to be another story. What happens to the backup catcher spot? So you're right. A team that's 8 games up, they're starting to have some questions emerge, which happens over 162.
Right, it's just the nature of the game, and you're right. I think if they were in that situation again this year, they want to end the game with a more powerful guy at the plate, a more experienced guy at the plate than Jake Cave. So it's amazing the twists and turns of the 162-game season. And yeah, Phillies over the next couple of weeks, is the starting pitching going to hold up? Do they need a right-handed bat off the bench? Bullpen help? You have another shaky outing by Strahm and Hoffman, and all of a sudden we're asking questions about them. So it's amazing how you're up 3-0 in the 7th inning with 2 outs, and everything seems great, and then boom, 3 innings later, you got a host of problems.
Mike, let's flip over real quick over to the NBA, and the draft finished up. Free agency starts on Sunday. Your Knicks, we talked about it Wednesday. They had Bridges. They did not have OG Anunoby at that time. They now do. You got to be pretty excited about where their fortunes are. But I guess the next guy to keep an eye on is Hartenstein. If they could get him back, now I think you got to take him as a legitimate title contender.
Yeah, I mean, if Hartenstein comes back, that gives him flexibility to play small, play big. I mean, his offensive rebounding ability, that little hook shot he has in the lane, that little floater he has in the lane is outstanding. If they bring him back, and I just think they're adding firepower to it, Mike. Everybody talks defense and everything else, but when it comes down to the playoffs, you've got to put the ball in the basket. You've got to have guys who can create shots. And remember, this is a Knicks team that played without Julius Randle against the Sixers and the rest of the playoffs, and now adds Mikal Bridges. You're adding 45 to 50 points a game, 2 guys with the ability to create shots. That's going to take pressure off Brunson. That's going to make the Knicks awfully tough to defend. And on the flip side, what does everybody in the NBA want? They want defensive wings, guys who can guard on the perimeter, and Anunoby and Bridges, they are two of the best in the league right now.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com. It's happy hour Friday. Did Rob Thompson have a cold one with him after all these injuries?
He should, maybe. We'll find out, But if there ever is a night to have one, last night was one of them.
Yes, it was. All right, Mike, we'll catch you on Monday, man.
All right, we'll see you down the road. Thanks.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com, here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, you heard the breaking news per Matt Gelb. Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, they're going on the 10-day injured list. To replace them on the IL, it'll be Rojas and Clemens coming up. Now, I don't see a lineup from up there. It is. So Stott is leading off. And your lineup tonight is brought to you by Clark's Moving and Storage, located in Rio Grande, moving to Breeze with Clark's Moving and Storage. Stott leading off, Turner at short, Bohm at third, Marsh in right field tonight. Castellanos is the designated hitter. Clemens is at first. Merrifield is in left. Stubbs is catching. And Rojas is back in center field. So Stott, Turner, Bohm, Marsh, Castellanos, Clemens, Merrifield, Stubbs. So it is a literal left, right, left almost all the way through. The only two right-handers back-to-back are Turner and Bohm. Christopher Sanchez is your starting pitcher tonight. So there you go. We'll break that down a little bit more because I do have some thoughts on the lineup. Rojas is back. He's starting tonight in center field. Castellanos, he's the DH tonight. No Sosa in the lineup. I'm a little surprised by that. Merrifield's in the lineup in left field. Clemens is back. Well, they facing a right-handed pitcher, I guess. Yeah. So Clemens is back. They're putting him right in at first base. I thought maybe, and you probably will see more Bohm at first base moving forward here. All right, we'll talk more about the Phils. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com. He's going to join me in 18 minutes from now. Stick around. More Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN.
It's the Sports.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
And I am the voice of the voiceless.
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
2:47. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. If you're watching, hit the like button, repost us. That would be very nice of you. So the news just came down. Harper and Schwarber are going on the injured list. Cody Clemens and Johan Rojas have been called up, and both of those guys are in the lineup tonight. So it is a situation now where you're going to be without those guys. I have to imagine you're going to be without those guys to at least after the All-Star break, and that's not being, very aggressive here. I mean, you talk about the All-Star break is like 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. I don't think you're going to see either one of those guys until after the All-Star break. And then the question becomes, will you see them in the month of July at all? They're both on the 10-day. Now, the way that this is being worded is they avoided significant injuries. I don't know that that means all that much, though. I don't know that saying that they've avoided significant injury says, they're going to be back in, when the 10-day is up. Significant injury to me, when you say, hey, they avoided significant injury, that means they avoided missing the entire season. And not that you think like a hamstring injury, but you never know. I mean, the way it looked last night for Bryce Harper, it was not good. The Schwarber one I didn't see nearly as closely as the Harper one. I wasn't watching at the time when Schwarber ended up getting hurt.
Yeah, so Schwarber was basically running in to back up the play in the infield, and it was like he stepped a certain way, and you saw his, not as much his face, but like his body language, like that didn't feel good. Kind of like move, like, oh. So, and then immediately they pulled him from the game. So you knew something was wrong.
Yeah, when I tuned back in, Marsh was out there.
Right. It was literally the very next inning. There was no real, hey, seeing Schwarber talk to him. It was like literally he was just gone. So obviously whatever he did to that groin, because they're calling it, I believe it's a left groin, that it was serious enough that they say, you know what, let's not take any dangerous moves with this guy and let him get fully recovered, because they need him as well as Harper. So,
well, yeah, I mean, listen, we all know they've had them last year and they haven't been good enough. You're hoping that they're good enough this time around. The question will be, how long can they sustain the lead they have in the division over the Atlanta Braves, 8 games up, without those two guys? Now, the lineup tonight, let's take a look at it again and kind of see what the Phillies' mindset is here. They are keeping, as I kind of thought, Turner in the number 2 hole here. They decided to not mess with him and leave him in the number 2 hole, which I'm not that surprised about. I know, you mentioned the lineup with Turner, then Stott, and then Bohm. They ended up going the other way. Stott, then Turner, then Bohm. So they didn't want to mess with Turner.
Right.
So then Bohm moves from 4th. He is now, look, there's a lot more pressure for the guy in the number 3 spot. You're the only guy in the lineup now, right? You have others, obviously, but where you have Harper in front of you, now you're the guy that everybody's thinking about.
Right.
And Brandon Marsh is the guy hitting behind him.
I'm a little surprised about that, but I understand their thinking with the whole right-left deal. So
right, so Stott lefty, Turner right, Bohm right, Marsh left, Castellanos right, Clemens left, Merrifield right, Stubbs left, Rojas right. So you're really going left, right, everywhere except for Turner and Bohm. So they decided to not move Turner from 2. They put Stott into the leadoff spot. This is a big spot for Stott now. He has not had a very good year. He has been mildly, I don't want to say mildly, he's been more than mildly disappointing.
He's been very disappointing. I think there are a lot of people who were looking at him saying this is his year to take a step forward. And while Bohm has taken a major step forward, Stott has basically been left behind at this point.
Fair to say. So he now goes from a guy who has struggled to a guy that now has a much bigger role on this team than he did 24 hours ago. In fact, Stott wasn't even in the lineup yesterday.
No, he wasn't.
You have to wonder, are they looking at Bryson Stott now as a platoon player?
They might be. I mean, we've talked about how, the 93 team had guys like Morandini and Mariano Duncan, Jim Eisenreich, and Milt Thompson. They may be treating Stott that way. And I think that is also a disappointment, because you looked at Stott developing into an everyday player.
Yeah, last year, by the way, he's .239 this year against left-handed pitching. Last year against left-handed pitching, he actually hit better against lefties than he did righties. He was .282 last year against left-handers, and he was .280 last year against right-handers. So it is in there that he can hit left-handed pitching, but so far this year, he has struggled against lefties. I will say this, his on-base percentage against lefties and righties is actually better against lefties than it is against righties, but his slugging and OPS are down significantly from the left side than it is the right side.
Mike,
now,
I was going to ask, from your perspective, is that a situation if Stott is not seeing the ball as well this year than last year maybe? Like, is he not seeing the ball out of the pitcher's hand maybe?
Not sure. I mean, that kind of stuff is hard to kind of tell from, if you see a flaw in his swing or his mechanics if you're a pitcher or something, but him not seeing the ball, that would be something that only he really could, kind of, bring up at this stage. Hey, I'm not seeing the spin. A lot's what great hitters pick up. They pick up the spin right out of the pitcher's hand, and that's how, they can identify, I'm going to hold off because there's a breaking ball, something that Castellanos does a lousy job with.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Castellanos, some of those swings are so bad. I don't see those horrible swings as often as Stott.
Marsh is in the 4 hole tonight. Think about that. Brandon Marsh, who at times has hit 9th or 8th, he is now hitting 4th. Castellanos 5th, Cody Clemens 6th, Whit Merrifield 7th, Garrett Stubbs 8th, and Johan Rojas is back, and he is in the 9th hole tonight.
Welcome back, Rojas.
Bob Wankel from RedOctoberPhilly.com. Is he concerned, and how concerned is he about these injuries? And if the Phillies can hold up their 8-game lead, he joins me next.
This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
Happy Hour Friday on a Sports Bash. Interesting day. Phillies lose last night. That's kind of not the story, although there is some stories from that game we'll get into. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com, Crossing Broad. You heard Bryce Harper last night, who obviously had a sound in his voice, which was, I don't think this went very well. I don't like the way this thing felt here. Bryce Harper said after the game, I never had this feeling before. And anybody out there listening who has had a hamstring problem, it is pretty evident that they are not fun.
How concerned are you?
I mean, I don't know. I don't really, like I said, I haven't really felt anything like this before. So if I had something to go back on, I would, let you know. But I've never felt anything like this before.
I've never felt anything like this before. Guess what? When you have a hamstring injury, it feels like somebody shot you in your hamstring, and it is not good. Now, they said that they have avoided significant injury, Bob Wankel, but that could mean like, hey, he's not lost for the season. But you heard it, you saw his face, you heard him. When they announced today he's going on the injured list, but not significant, do you still think that he will miss a chunk of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that overall the news here is positive, or about as positive as it could be. I mean, last night, you talk about it, just a disaster. It was a disastrous loss. It was a game they should have never lost to a terrible team. Schwarber goes out, and then the way the game ends with Harper going out, you're like, my God, like in one night you're thinking this is a World Series contender, and you're wondering by midnight if this team is going to win the East and what this is all going to look like come October. So to get the news that you got today that it's low grade, certainly he's going to miss some time, and certainly they're going to be cautious, but I think that they definitely caught a break here. This doesn't feel like a 6 to 8 week deal. This doesn't feel like a Trey Turner deal. This feels more like maybe a post-All-Star break deal.
Yeah, I when I saw him and then heard him, the first thing I'm thinking is Turner, like 6 to 8 weeks there. And then today they give you the news, okay, it's not as bad as you think. But, man, he said he's never felt like this before. That's one of those things where, as you said, they got to be really careful with this. So, I don't know. You might see something maybe 4 or 5 weeks for him. The Schwarber thing, he has a groin injury here. I don't know. Do you look at it and say, why the heck is he playing the outfield last night, or is this something that was unavoidable?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, look, there were a lot of people that are saying, why the heck is he playing the outfield last night? And Brandon Marsh coming off a 4-hit day and all this stuff. But I mean, Brandon Marsh can't hit left-handed pitching. Just like I don't know why people are surprised by this. I think that the biggest thing here is the Kyle Schwarber will probably be back either right ahead of the All-Star break or right after it. So you're talking probably about anywhere between 10 to 15 game absence. Bryce Harper probably misses the 15 games between now and the All-Star break. This is not enough to derail a season. Like this should not be enough to derail the Phillies' World Series hopes. Shouldn't be enough to alter their approach at the trade deadline and going for it. It shouldn't alter their confidence in winning the division. And the bottom line here is, in the next couple of weeks, they have 3 more games with a terrible Marlins team who they let off the hook last night. You have to take care of business. Before the All-Star break, you get 3 games with the Oakland A's at home. You better take care of business. And in between that, you have 3 games against a mediocre at best Cubs team. And then obviously the Braves down in Atlanta will be tricky. And then you come back and you have 3 with the Dodgers here. Like, you've got to tread water here. Are the Phillies going to go 10-5 or better over the next 15 games with this lineup? No, probably not. But the pitching is good enough that they probably should be able to win somewhere between 7 to 9 games, stay afloat, and then get healthy after the break, get your guys back, and go make a run at it.
All right. Now that's, you just brought up a couple things, Bob. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com, that stand out to me. One is, yes, you have the Marlins and the Cubs here who are just okay, but you have the Braves and the Dodgers entering the All-Star break. That is where it's going to get very tricky if these guys, and I would imagine they're not going to be able to play in that series. So you have two really big series going into the All-Star break that can really change the way you look when you come out of the All-Star break. And you just said something about them not being in the lineup. What did you think of today's lineup with Stott hitting leadoff, Turner staying in the 2-hole? Now, Bohm, Brandon Marsh hitting 4. As you just said, he's not even an everyday player, really. Castellanos, Cody Clemens, Merrifield, Stubbs, and now Rojas is back hitting in the 9-hole. Were you surprised at the way they stacked that lineup today?
I'm not necessarily surprised, but I'd be lying if I said that you were overly enthusiastic about that. I mean, Clemens, Merrifield, Stubbs, Rojas. That's tough, man. And these guys have had their moments. They've contributed. It's no knock on them, but you stacking those 4 guys together at the bottom of your lineup is not something that you want to do in an ideal world, obviously. I mean, look, you know what the immediate take is. Like, hey, Nick Castellanos, like, good job getting up off the mat, but it's time now. Like, you've got to get hot for a week or two here and carry this thing. Hey, Trey Turner, you're a $30 million guy. He's had a good season. He had a couple hits last night. It's not like he hasn't been doing his job, but, like, this is your time now. Like, you've got to step up. You've got to do it. Hey, Brandon Marsh, like, you got to get going here. Like, nice game the other day. You got to keep it up. Like, they're guys that are remaining in this lineup now really have to get it done. Like, hey, Bryson Stott, it's time. Like, you can't hit 240 with a 690 OPS anymore. Like, you need your dudes to be dudes now, and try to help them kind of keep this thing afloat.
Yeah, because, Trey Turner, I guess you could have thought about putting, because, we were kind of tweaking, hey, Turner 1, Stott 2, Bohm 3. I guess they didn't want to move Turner out of that number 2 spot.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, the way that Bryson Stott has swung the bat, it doesn't scream like, hey, let's let this guy lead off. But I mean, there might be something to be said for what I just basically laid out, which is you've kind of been in this fog all season. You had a couple weeks where you were hot, but other than that, you've been pretty bad, I'd say, overall. And, this is maybe a situation where you say, you're going to the leadoff spot. Let's see if this is a little bit of a jolt of life for you, a little jolt of energy to get him going, kind of almost put the pressure on him and say, like, we think you're this guy. Now it's time for you to be this guy. And so I actually don't hate the fact that they hit him leadoff tonight.
Would you anticipate, Bob, that we're going to see Bohm be a primary first baseman, or is that just going to be every night of the week? It's going to be Bohm at first, Clemens at first, Sosa at third, Merrifield at third. You know what I mean? Like, or do you just say, Bohm, you're playing first, and Sosa is at third, and Merrifield, you might get some third?
I don't know. I guess I see them trying to get, especially against left-handed pitching. I mean, I think that you're going to see Sosa play third base quite a bit here. I mean, I think they're going to do everything they can against left-handed pitching to get both Sosa and Bohm in the lineup. And, quite honestly, I think that might even be independent of platoon matchups. I mean, I think that Edmundo Sosa is probably going to get a more extended run here now. Obviously, you don't see him in there tonight, but I think that moving forward here over the next few weeks, he's going to get more opportunities as well.
Yeah, I was a little surprised no Sosa tonight, actually.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Now, what about Stott? He hasn't been playing against lefties every day. Now, does that change that he's the pseudo leadoff guy?
Yeah, I think they almost have to play him every day here. It's been, I think they're trying to get him unlocked. I think they've been trying to get him in some advantageous matchups, and so they've sat him down in spots. But I think in this situation, when you have just the injuries that they have to the extent that they have them, I mean, you need your guys to play. And I mean, it's obviously going to be incumbent upon him to actually produce, but I think you have to give him the opportunity here now. All right.
Now, no, obviously, Schwarber and Harper. That's 2 big bats. We see Jazz Chisholm is in town. Randy Arozarena is starting to heat up a little bit. Taylor Ward's name, Tommy Pham, was here in the playoffs last year. Lewis Roberts' name, of course, has been brought up a lot. Do you start to make more phone calls quicker?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that the problem now is the problem that we talked about a week ago, which is, look, there are so many teams that are still in this race. I think it's going to take a while for this market to materialize, and I think that the Phillies are probably looking at it from the perspective of none of these absences are going to be long-term. We're not going to overpay to get a player in here a month earlier than we otherwise would have. I just don't think the Phillies are going to pay an additional premium to beat the rest of the market in light of these injuries. These aren't 6 to 8 to 10 week injuries. These are right now, I think, based on what they believe, 2 to 3, 4 weeks at worst injuries. So I just don't think that you're going to pay the premium to beat the deadline. And I just think there's so many teams that are still trying to figure out what they are, that there's the teams that end up selling probably aren't convinced that they're going to sell right now. So I don't think it's really going to change the timeline on how they get somebody in here.
All right, let's pull the lens out a little further here. Real Muto, probably sometime around the All-Star break. Are the Phillies looking at their backup catching situation now? We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but Marchand is obviously it helps this team more, it seems, than Stubbs, no?
Yeah, it's a tough spot. I think that this is a situation where you probably what I think is going to happen, and I'm not telling you this is what should happen, but my guess is that Garrett Stubbs is so well liked in the locker room and clubhouse that he is here through the remainder of the year, and they probably move on from him after this season. And Marchand is here as depth. As we've seen guys get hurt, I think that that's what's going to happen. But if you put me on the spot and said, hey, who's the better player right now, and how do you build the best 26-man roster? And I guess Marchand is probably the better player, but I think that there's just different considerations that go into it, and I would be surprised if they went a different direction.
All right, let's go to the pitching problem now. Spencer Turnbull is out. Yeah. I can't imagine, Bob Wankel, they wanted to rush Taijuan Walker back, but now with Turnbull out 6 to 8 weeks, you have a question in that spot. So Michael Mercado's got a big start potentially coming up here, unless they just turn this thing back over. But did you get the feeling they weren't trying to rush Walker back like right away when he was ready, if Turnbull had kind of handled that spot?
Yeah, I don't think that Taijuan Walker was a guy that you were going to just see two times through the rotation and he's back. I mean, I think that there's just other concerns there. I mean, when you're talking about we've got to find ways to get his velocity back. I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's an interesting proposition because I don't know that his velocity is ever coming back. They can talk about the hot spot on the finger and how it impacts the splitter, which was really the one pitch that he threw with some effectiveness last season. It's been absent for him this year. I think that right now they not only I believe that there's an injury. I'm not saying that's something that they just created to buy time, but I do think that there's a little bit of a reset going on here where there's no intention to just bring him back after 10 days. I mean, I think that they are looking at this and saying, all right, how do we reset? How do we reset this guy? How do we try to get the most out of him moving forward? Or what are we going to do with him? Does the Turnbull injury change that? It might. Mercado's interesting. He had a really good spring. He opened up a lot of eyes this spring, and then he went down and he pitched pretty well in the minor league. He had 1.71 ERA over 47 and a third innings, struck out 44. He was pretty effective for them. And so he'll get a couple opportunities here, and guess they'll just play it by ear. I mean, the good news is that your top 4 guys are about as good as it gets, and, a little inconsistency in your 5th spot really shouldn't make or break you, I guess.
Yeah,
if you want to take the glass half full look at it.
Yeah, that's the big thing is that, and what we can kind of tie this into a conversation, Bob, is this is a team that with all the injuries, you have this pitching, and that's where you're hoping keeps you afloat, right? And it's that you still have good enough pitching that you're hopeful that this lead shouldn't be diminished by the time these guys are back because of the 4 guys.
Yeah, you hope so. And when you get leads late, I mean, look, it's one game last night, but it was exacerbated. That loss was exacerbated by what happened with the injuries. I mean, now you're when you talk about treading water, well, guess what? When you bring a 3-0 lead into the 7th inning against the Marlins, you kind of win those games. So you better hope now that your starting pitching holds up 1 through 4, much the way it has for the bulk of this season so far.
Yep.
But when you get those leads late, they can't afford now any Matt Strahm regression. They can't afford Jeff Hoffman.
That's it. You just brought up an interesting thing there, because what happened I saw some people complaining that they left. Why leave Wheeler out there for 115 pitches? And I said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you pull him at the end of the 6th with a shutout, you're saying, why'd you pull the guy? Right? Yeah. I mean, so the blueprint was what they wanted. You got Wheeler dealing, and then you turn it over to Strahm and Hoffman. That's if you're going to win the World Series, that's what you're trying to get.
Yeah. I mean, look, at some point you can complain about what the manager does, but people people are always in my DMs. People respond to us online, not just me, but other reporters and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, you guys are easy on Rob. Like, okay. Like, the bottom line is Zach Wheeler goes and gives him 6+ last night, and the game is there to be had with your best relievers to go. I mean, like, if Matt Strahm and Jeff Hoffman don't do the job and you lose, like, well, then you lose. You got beat. Like, you had your best guys out there in the spots that you wanted them out there.
Yep.
So, I don't know what you say about that. If those guys aren't going to get it done, then you're in trouble. I mean, these guys have been, Hoffman and Strahm specifically, have been two of the best relief pitchers in the National League this season. So I'm willing to say, hey, all right, look, things happen. But I will say, the last couple times out, Hoffman has looked a little bit shaky. Strahm has not been quite as sharp recently. And Jose Alvarado has not been the same guy this season. I mean, he's been pretty good, but he has not been, that guy that we saw the second half of 22, the guy who really, really reined in his control last season, limited the walks. Like, he's not been as good. So look, I mean, they get these leads, like they've got to hold on to them now. When you're missing this type of offensive punch between Real Muto, Harper, Schwarber, guys got to get it done when they get the ball now.
Yeah, that is that you just laid it down pretty good there, Bob. Is if you have Wheeler, and by the way, he gets 2 outs in the 7th, so it's not like, hey, this guy had 110 pitches. And there's nobody out and there's 2 guys on. What are you doing? He had 2 outs in the 7th inning and then really struck the next guy out, or he thought he struck the next guy out and gave the guy a little side eye walking off the field. And then Strahm comes in and obviously hits the guy. He loads the bases and then the guy doubles off him. And then Bell, who seemingly, does Bell get a hit against anybody else in the league?
No, he's not a very good hitter, but I do think, and I feel scientifically, I'm pretty sure without looking at Baseball Reference, he's hitting about 840 against the Phillies lifetime.
And I feel like he's played on every single team that, he's been on Washington, he's been on the Padres. It's unbelievable. He's on the Marlins. I mean, it's like every team that's kind of like a little that you show up against in the Brewers, in the playoffs or is a thorn in your side. He's always the guy. It's like, it's the worst team in baseball. He's on it, and he's the only guy that hits you. When he was in Washington, it feels that way. But all right, Phils last night, they lose. They'll finish this set, but man, what seemed like a lot of fun conversations throughout the summer have turned into a little bit of an ominous thing with no Harper, no Real Muto, and no Schwarber for the foreseeable future here, probably through at least the All-Star break and possibly beyond. We'll see. Do you anticipate any of those guys being back by the end of June into August?
By the end of July?
July. Well, yeah, after the All-Star break. So I guess we all agree they won't play before the All-Star break?
I mean, I never count out Bryce Harper. I mean, I could see he's eligible to come off the IL on the 9th against the Dodgers. I mean, if there was ever a guy that could get back, and if there was ever a series that he would want to get back for, Ohtani, Harper, the top 2 guys in the MVP race, like, he would be ultra motivated to do it, but I think the Phillies will probably be cautious. Yeah. I would be surprised if you saw him in that.
I'll tell you what, man. I talked about this earlier. I mean, Bryce Harper might be the superest of supermen that we've ever seen wear that uniform. If you have a hamstring injury, I don't care how Superman you are. That ain't fun, man.
I think it's a situation where you really just have to kind of talk him down a little bit and say, like, look, I get it. I know you want to be out there, but there's a bigger prize to be had here.
Bob Wankel taking some time. So you're in Newport, Rhode Island. Is that where you are?
Yeah, live from Newport, Rhode Island.
One of my favorite summer spots, man. They got the Cardines Field. It's like the 3rd oldest baseball park in America. They got the Sunset League there, a little wooden bat men's league over there. Actually, it's like a college league.
That might be a little bit of a tough sell for the wife, but it'll be the Bowens Wharf. We got 78, not a cloud in the sky here, so there'll be some beers to be had.
Well, the Cliff Walk, I know they were doing some work on the Cliff Walk, but you can trade out for the game. Say, hey, what about the Cliff Walk? Let's take a little walk.
Actually, Mike, we did the Cliff Walk this morning, so we got our steps in.
Okay, there you go. It's what a view. Gloria Vanderbilt's home right there. You've got, and then, you go over to the White Horse Tavern. It's the oldest pub in America.
All right, good to know. A little history. I like that.
Yeah, buddy. I'm here to help you. I'm a tour guy. What am I in Clearwater? I
think I called you the human TripAdvisor. So.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, enjoy Newport. It's a great little town.
Very good. All right. Talk soon.
All right, buddy. Bob Wankel, RedOctoberPhilly.com. And make sure you subscribe to the newsletter and check out his work at Crossing Broad as always. Newport, Rhode Island's one of my favorite spots to go. Been there twice. White Horse Tavern. Definitely got to hit the White Horse Tavern up. The old baseball park, Cardines Field, it's like a little mini version of, I say really mini version. Like, so it is like this old, so basically like the South Shore League that we have here, the men's league, it's called the Sunset League. It's like a college summer league. And there's like, it's actually a pretty cool idea is instead of like people going into this league where they pay, they have owners of the team and like they own the team and the town just really gets behind gets behind them. It is a huge deal up there. And the league is called the Sunset League, and it's like a college wooden bat league up there. But you got to check out Cardines Field if you ever go up to Newport, Rhode Island. All right, Mike Gill, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, Darius Slay was on the Green Light podcast. Find out which player he thinks will have a special year this year. You'll be very surprised because I was. The guy's name that he brought up as who to watch out for, it surprised me. So I imagine it will surprise you too. That's next. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive. And I have a deal for you. Bring a written estimate for a new 2024 Acura from another Acura dealer over to my friend Rocco at Key Acura of Atlantic City. He'll beat that price by $500, and he'll give you an additional $500 on your trade. Now, through this weekend, get a 36-month lease on a 2024 Integra for just $299 a month with $49.95 down. Key Acura, Tilton Road, EHT, your small but friendly dealer. See dealer for details. That deal goes till tomorrow, right? Tomorrow. They don't open on Sunday. There's no dealerships open on Sunday, right? More Sports Bash coming up.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
It is a lot different this year. And one thing I can say about Nolan, ever since I met Nolan, he only know one speed. He one of the guys you got to watch out for your own self because he hit teammates and everybody. So even in practice, man, he's the guy that's going to run to the ball. He's not a 10-yard guy. He more like, I'm trying to see ball, get ball. He's going to be a special year, man, for him this year, man. Especially after him running behind Hassan all year. I think it'll be very special.
That was Darius Slay on the Green Light podcast. The guy he thinks is going to be special this year. It's not the guy that any of us would have picked, I don't think, right? Nolan Smith. So I'll ask you guys out there, 609-403-0973. Give me an Eagle you think is going to exceed expectations this year. He says Nolan Smith. Who do you say? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Give me an Eagle you think is going to surprise this year and exceed expectations. Now, when he said Nolan Smith, I must fell out of my seat.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, obviously he didn't have much of a role last year, and he said in that bite there, which I think is interesting, he said with Reddick, last year he didn't get a chance. But don't we think Bryce Huff is going to kind of come in here and kind of take that role over? Where does Nolan Smith get on the field that he has the impact that Slay is kind of, portraying here?
Well, Huff only played about 50% of the Jets snaps last year, so Is there a possibility that the Eagles are going to go back to what they used to do, which is rotating defensive ends? Maybe it's Huff and Smith and Sweat all getting rotation spots. Like maybe it's like a breakdown of, I don't know the exact number, but if Huff and Sweat are playing, 50% each of the snaps and Smith gets the other chunk from each one, or do you think it's maybe like a 60-40 split?
It's a good question. I'm not sure because, Josh Sweat was a guy who played a lot. Reddick is a guy who played a lot. Are they going to start rotating those guys, Huff and Sweat out and Nolan Smith starts to get more snaps? I don't know how that all plays out. I'm kind of intrigued by it based on what Slay just said. That's what intrigues me by it because quite frankly, I don't know what to think of Slay this year. I mean, Smith this year. I didn't know what to think of Smith.
Well, remember he came in, he had built up muscle. Remember, he looked bigger and stronger. A lot of people were saying that. So if you combine that with a mentality of a guy who says see ball, get ball, that could be a pretty good combination. Maybe that's part of the reason why Slay is like, look, this guy's in just a really good mentality. Maybe he's also saying, this dude, I see him physically. He's ready now kind of deal.
Maybe. I'm excited to hear that. I can tell you when he says that, I'm like, okay, now that perks my attention up. Why? Because he could have gone the easy route, right? He could have said, oh, that Quinyon Mitchell, he's going to be a guy who's going to surprise you this year. Or that Cooper DeJean, he was awesome in minicamp, and I love what I see him. Now, here's what he had to say about what he saw from Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell.
These guys coming in and they working hard, man. They threw a lot at Dean. Dean, as a young kid, he's played every position out there in the secondary, man. So he's a smart, intelligent guy, and Q, he getting better. Explosive guy, man. Quentin, very explosive, very fast, very athletic. These guys coming in and playing, I can see these guys coming on and stepping on the field quick and fast because of the fact that, we need it.
He said they can get on the field quick and fast, and he said he likes them, and they're this and they're that. But when he was given the opportunity to talk about a guy who will surprise you this year, I think he could have been taking the easy way out. Oh, man, I told you before. Listen to what he says about Cooper DeJean.
He's special. Like, I saw Cooper DeJean. I saw him in high school playing basketball, right? I saw him just doing some windmill dunks and all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm like, woo! And then, I commented on there, literally, 4 years ago. He coming back, said, appreciate it and whatever. Then next thing you know, he drafted to us.
So you hear how excited he is about Cooper DeJean. So when asked the question by Chris Long, give me a player who's going to surprise this year, it would have been easy to say, Cooper DeJean, man. Do you see this guy's an amazing athlete? I saw him dunk in high school. We drafted him and he could get on the field pretty quickly. Or, hey, there's Quinyon Mitchell. He's a great athlete. He's got a lot of speed, blah, 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 blah. Bryce Huff. Oh, I mean, if he said Huff, that might not, but he said a guy who had zero impact last year. Zero impact. Last year, Nolan Smith was a busteroni. Now, I'm not like, hey, I gave up on this guy. He can't play. I think what he said at the end of that bite holds true is, hey, he was blocked last year by Reddick. And the interesting thing about that, and I'm not saying Reddick deserved to be pulled off the field, but here's something that Darius Slay says about Vic Fangio and the vibe he has given him so far as a defensive coordinator.
He was a good dude, man, respectful. He's quiet, though. He's more of a guy you got to go into his office. He really more detailed. He tell you from every position what job need to be done and how you do it. And this is how he wanted to look. And he go about his day. So he look like the type of coach that if you don't do what my job needs you to do, I don't care how much you get paid, I'm benching you. So
that's what you need.
That's the type of coach you want.
Yeah, that's the type of coach you want.
That's the kind of coach you want. What he said at the end sticks out the most. Why? I don't care what you're getting paid. He's sitting you. And you wonder if there's a part of your voice that says that in, hey, I hate to throw my corner tag team partner under the bus last year, but he probably shouldn't have been out there, but he was out there because of what he was getting paid. That's what I thought. I'm not saying that that's what he was insinuating, but that's what entered my mind when I heard him say that, is that Vic Fangio, he don't care what your salary says. If you're not performing, you're on the bench.
And you mentioned the other guy, James Bradbury. Literally, Bradbury's name barely came up at all in like the 40-plus minutes they talked. I listened to the Green Light Pod, and it was more like an in passing comment about Bradbury. Like, so I don't know.
I didn't hear the pod, so I don't know. You said it was like a lot of quick, rapid fire.
Yeah, there was a lot of like hitting on different topics.
So I don't know what the questions were.
So like the conversation started initially with him having Slay on. Basically, they were referring to the fact that, hey, you're doing a podcast, I'm doing a podcast. Then he went into, hey, talk about last year versus this year. And he was talking about how, hey, look, we got these young players here now. He's like, we're a talented team now. We brought back C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He said, and then he mentioned Bradbury in passing. He's like, last year we had a lot of inexperienced guys aside from me and JB. Like, he didn't say JB helped. He just said just aside from me and JB. It was kind of like a throw it into the conversation. So, they talked about Devin White. They talked about Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Vic Fangio. So, and then the young corners, as you heard. So, like, there was a lot of, like, conversational talk. And then they got into, like, really deep into, like, how do you play a cover three? Like, there was some really, like, deep conversation we don't have to get into. But, they ran into a lot of conversation. Bradbury was never like, hey, man, do you think Bradbury's going to be better this year? Like, that never came up.
Give me, by the way, a couple text messages. Johnny and Cape May Courthouse says Jalen Carter will have a great year. Why don't we play the bite that he mentions Jalen Carter here?
Man, he's a different beast. With Fletch, you could he said the same thing as in like, hey man, this kid could be very, very special, man. If he just like lock in and just do this and do that and do whatever, cause I'm not in their room every day, but when he out there in practice, he's going. We in the game, he's going. Nobody's blocking him.
So he obviously said he's a different kind of beast, and
referring to Fletcher.
Who? No, I thought he was talking about Jalen Carter's a different kind of beast.
He's saying Carter's different than Cox is what the...
Yeah, but I'm saying, he's saying that this dude's a different type of beast.
He's
as opposed to what Fletcher Cox was.
Right.
The kind of, guy, and basically suggesting, like, when this guy's on, he can wreck a room. I'm just hoping that the guy's on. Like, I don't want to see a guy, because last year he was so good, and then, I was looking up this, the numbers on him the other day. He got off to such a great start. And then the first 6 weeks of the year, he had like 3.5 sacks. And then after that, he basically had like 2 sacks the whole last 10 weeks of the year. Darius Slay on the Green Light Podcast, hosted by Chris Long. By the way, let's get another text message in. Who do you think's an Eagle who will surprise this year? This is interesting. Saquon Barkley will surprise better than advertised. I mean, you'd have to really, really surprise.
I mean, how much better can you be than being one of the top 5 running backs in the league? Are you saying he's going to be the best? Are you saying he's going to have a first-team All-Pro season?
I'm not hating on the fact that, like he's saying, we'll be surprised by Barkley, because I, too, think Barkley's going to be much better in Philly with this offensive line and weapons around him. I think in New York, the offensive line was terrible.
Sure.
There was no weapons around him, so everybody keyed on him. You can't key on him nearly as much, I would think, in this offense. You do that, you're going to get burned by A.J. Brown or Smith or Goddard. So I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity to show what kind of player he really is. Like, we saw he was a really good player. Unfortunately, you're getting him not at the peak, maybe at the end of his peak.
I mean, I'm not saying it's apples to apples comparison, but is it maybe something like when Marshall Faulk, he started his career in Indianapolis. He was good in Indianapolis, but then he got to the greatest show on turf with Isaac Bruce and all those guys, and then he really blossomed. Like, is it maybe something like that?
I'll tell you what, that's one of the best observations you've ever made in your life.
Wow, thanks.
That's a good one, where you had a player who was really good on a team, and then went to another team, and was actually significantly better. Not that he wasn't really good on the one team, he was significantly better. Why? Because they had the greatest show on turf around him. In Indianapolis, Marshall Faulk was the whole team.
Right.
And he was really good. But then, they got Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Nazir Hakeem. I can't just focus on Marshall Faulk, otherwise I'm going to get ripped.
And then he goes out and has an MVP caliber season multiple years over there.
So yeah, whoever sent that text message, Jeff in Ocean City. By the way, Jeff chimed in earlier today. He's happy hour Friday, enjoying a Cape May cruising it on the back deck. He sent a picture of the can. It's actually a crushing it. He wrote cruising it, but it's a crushing it. You know how I know that? Because he sent the picture.
That's always a plus. That's always helpful.
Now, we were at my at the graduation party last
Saturday.
Week. Yeah. And somebody at the party said, I really like a crushing it.
Crushing it is really good.
And I said, I have one.
Boom.
Went and got it, delivered it to the young lady, and she said, well, thank you. So you come to my house and you ask for something, I come through.
Are you saying Mike Gill delivers?
Well, I will say that somebody else delivered that beer and left it there. You know, it was in the fridge of the other side, the fridge that people bring over. Now, you were going through my fridge big time.
I was seeing what you had initially. I was curious because you always tell me you have a million things in your fridge, and I'm like, what's even in here?
Yeah, well, there was a lot.
There was a lot.
And at the end of the day, not so much.
No, by the end of the night, I'm sure it was pretty well through.
Here was the issue I was having where people were going through the wrong fridge. They were going through my fridge, not the other fridge.
The other fridge.
Yeah, so I said, you know, because a lot of those wild beers that I have in that one fridge are from the subscription service.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I only get like one of those.
Right.
So I'm not usually handing them out to the people.
Correct. Yeah, you're handing out the ones that you have, multiples of.
That's right. All right, let's hear what Darius Slay thinks about the addition of Devin White to this defense.
Very athletic, man, faster than what you think. Big guy, too. Man, I was excited about that signing. I kind of had a vision where after we kind of played Tampa a little bit, I said, man, if Devin become a free agent, I could see him coming over here just because I feel like it's a fit for him. You know, we need a linebacker because, you know, you've been here.
Yeah.
We know we D-line driven.
Always.
You know, so they just need a linebacker to be able to hit and run. And he does a good job of that. And he can cover.
He can cover. All right, there's a little interesting tidbit at the end there. He talked about faster than you think. I'm really intrigued by what Devin White's going to bring to the table. I don't know what to think. You know, Colin Thompson, who an NFL player, you know, played against Devin White when he was in Carolina. He said, the guy's a player. Got people who have covered that team said can't play. I mean, not they can't play. He is not a coachable guy.
Yeah, there were concerns about him as a disciplined guy, staying in his lane, doing his job, following the playbook at times, because he had such a monster first 2 years in Tampa, and then he never really progressed from there. So, you know, the Eagles probably brought him in, and they're seeing him at practice like Slay is, you know, the off-season stuff, and saying, I'm seeing this guy fly around. I'm seeing him do different things. I saw him in Tampa. I see what he can do. So I'm assuming if Slay sees it, the Eagles got to see it, right?
Yeah, and what Slay said is like, look, if he can't play, I don't care what your salary is. The question is, if Devin White can't play, I think you're screwed.
Right, you are.
You don't have a lot of options there.
But it's an interesting point you brought up about Fangio, because he mentioned how Fangio is not the kind of guy who says, you know, he's not doing what the Phillies do with Taijuan Walker, right? He's not saying, well, this guy's making all this money, I got to play him. Vic Fangio, Slay says, is the kind of guy that says, I don't care who you are. If you're not doing your job, you're not getting on the field, man.
Yeah.
That's a completely different mentality.
I want to hear what Slay thought about having to play with the revolving door of safeties last season.
Now, corners is really only good as his safety as he communicates to him. Sometimes that's just how it is. Because if my safety makes me understand what I'm doing and gets me in the right position, because we don't hit the calls, we're always on the side. Definitely if you're the far corner. Them young guys trying to come in, they just like, what's the play? I got the play. I'm doing my job. It's more like, hey, what's the call? You know, they're looking at the other, like, because I'm not getting it. They get tunnel vision. It was real difficult.
That's interesting. It was real difficult. It sounds a lot there like the safety position last year was a big factor in why they were not very good against the pass.
Yeah, and you heard him talk about how, you know, the corners on the outside don't get the play. It's a job of the safety, he says, to communicate to them. And he says this guy gets tunnel vision. He's just saying, I'm going to do my job. And Slay's like, well, I want to do my job too. Like, tell me what's going on here, which makes you wonder, Mike, how many of those blown coverages we saw last year. Remember Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan talked about how there were communication problems between the coaches and the players. Well, it sounds like there are also maybe some communication problems on the back end where they didn't have the veteran guys who knew that they got to communicate with the other players around them.
Yeah, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. As Led Zeppelin once said, a communication breakdown. Maybe that was the problem. They brought in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to bring that back because one of the things that Darius Slay said is that he explained how, like, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson never shuts up during the games.
You know, Chauncey gets it going, man. He got a mouth now, but he come play with it. You know, he backs his talk up a lot. So I just had to ask him one time, I say, man, how do you talk this much in the game and still this energized? Like, what did you take that I need to take? Because I'll be tired in the game. I can't talk to you. But for him, he talking every play. Mm-hmm. Every play. And it's good energy. It's great energy, man, because he letting everybody have it. You know, he's very communicative.
All right, good stuff from the Green Light Podcast. Darius Slay, I think he brought a lot of interesting things to the table there. He thinks Nolan Smith will be special this year. Give me an Eagle that you think will surprise and be special this year. Hit me up on the text board. We'll read them off on the other side. 609-403-0973. It's also happy hour Friday on the Sports Bash. What are you having on this happy hour Friday? Beautiful day out. I mean, it is a beautiful day out. Let me know right now. 609-403-0973. One Eagle surprise. And what are you having on this happy hour Friday?
It's this.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Mike Gill.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
On 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
351 Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Darius Slay says he thinks Nolan Smith will be special this year. Name an Eagles player you think will surprise this season. 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. Matt in Sicklerville, Texan, says Goddard in the new offense is going to be a TD machine. You know, Matt, I don't think you're wrong about that. I do think that Goddard, you know, I know we keep saying, somebody brought up an interesting point. Like, hey, how many years did we say that L.J. Smith was going to be the guy and then he just never was the guy? Maybe he is just who he is. With Goddard, I don't know that Goddard is just what he is. I think there's more from Goddard. He was the one year he was a 1,000-yard guy and he ends up getting hurt. So I definitely am interested to see more out of him moving forward here. But if Nolan Smith ends up being a surprise this season, I'll tell you what, that's a huge thing that you're not really anticipating. Right? How many people are coming into the season like, I know Nolan Smith's going to be a game wrecker. If he ends up, it's like the Phillies this year. Why are the Phillies special? Well, because Bohm took a big step forward. You've got Trey Turner. Now, Trey Turner's not a great example because you thought he was going to be really good, but he sucked at the beginning of last year. But then he got hurt too. But he got off to a great start, and that helped the Phillies get off to a great start. Bohm got off to a great start, and that helped the Phillies get off to a great start. Marsh got off to a good start, and that helped the Phillies. Guys that you go into the year saying Harper's got to be great, Schwarber's got to be great, Realmuto's got it, and those guys were pretty good. It's the other guys to have a special year. It's got to be guys that you're not, by the way, I'm forgetting the two really main guys here. Suarez, Sanchez, and then Strahm and Hoffman. Those are guys that, you didn't come into the year saying, hey, Hoffman and Strahm might be all-stars. Suarez and Sanchez might be all-stars. You're not thinking that, and that's a big key of why the Phillies are what they are. And if Nolan Smith is what Darius Slay is suggesting, that's a big difference maker for the team. 609-403-0973. Mike in Northfield says, Mike, I don't know if it's a big surprise, not a flashy one, but I can see Dickerson really becoming the anchor of the offensive line. With Juergens and the right guard being new, Dickerson may need to take ownership of the interior of the line and really shine. By the way, Mike is pouring a Tito's and Club. Not as exciting as my surprise Eagle, but both get the job done. Mike, that was well laid out. I don't know that Dickerson, I see what you're saying. I was going to say, I don't know that Dickerson's a surprise. I think most people think he's pretty damn good. But with the new offensive line, he might be the new face of that offensive line. He could be, what Quentin Nelson is to the Colts, where the interior lineman is the best lineman on the team. That Tito's and Club, that's all you, buddy. But hey, thanks for being a part of Happy Hour Friday. It gets the job done for me. More Sports Bash coming up on 97.3 ESPN. Adam Kaplan has football at 4 coming up next.
97.3 ESPN presents the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Kaplan, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I give my heart and soul to this franchise, as so many of us do.
Now live, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's brought to you by Bet365. Whenever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Kaplan is here from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget their YouTube channel where you can get a lot of extra content and Football at 4. Just search Inside the Birds. Adam Kaplan on this Happy Hour Friday. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm a little bummed about the Phillies injuries, but based on the reporting that's out there, hopefully that stuff's correct. And Harper's injury hopefully will not be as serious as Trey Turner's hamstring issue. Groin strain, for Schwarber, actually, I'm dealing with an adductor strain currently from tennis, so I kind of know what it's like to get that thing stretched out and make sure you're right. So you can't think this guy's going to be back in 2 weeks, so you got to be careful with that. So it could be worse, Mike, with these injuries. And, boy, they really need, talking Phillies here, and we'll go to Eagles. I felt like all season they've needed a right-handed bat off the bench as an outfielder, and, boy, they really need one right now.
Yeah, the injury problems over there, and, of course, inevitable over 162. Same like football, a lot of injuries there. One of the things we were going to talk about today during this edition of Football at 4 is some potential breakout players. And I know right before you came on, we were playing some of the audio from Darius Slay. He was on the Greenlight podcast with Chris Long, and he mentioned one that I thought was a pretty big surprise when he said he thinks Nolan Smith is going to be a surprise breakout player this year. And, it kind of stops you in your tracks, Adam, because you're thinking, all right, how many snaps can this guy get? What kind of role would Nolan Smith have?
Well, Mike, it's funny. I didn't know this because Josh told me before I came on here, your producer, that Nolan Smith was one of his guys, or maybe whatever you wanted to call it, a breakout player. Well, it just so happens our Thursday morning show, which you can get on YouTube or any platform anytime you want, folks, one of our breakout players was Nolan Smith. And first of all, he's going to play a lot more than last year. Brandon Graham won't play as much as he did last year, and Nolan Smith would be the first edge rusher off the bench. Now, as you point out, we don't know how many snaps that's going to be, but you can be a breakout player and play third of the snaps. If your snaps are terrific, sure. If we all would agree, if we're watching, go, wow, that was a great play, and the data backs it up, sure. So I'm expecting, Mike, him to have a good role for this team. Again, we know who the edge rushers are going to be. Bryce Huff, Josh Sweat. Now, here's another thing I want to mention. Josh Sweat is very lucky that the Eagles were willing to bring him back. His second. We do this. You'll hear this now. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up. So we're doing our off-season interviews with Greg Cosell, who works for us, and we do this NFC East preview series. We just taped the Eagles. The Eagles will be out on, I think, July 11th. I could tell you, Greg, because he only goes by what he sees on the All-22. He flat out said Josh Sweat didn't play well. I won't give you everything that he said about Josh Sweat. So what does that tell me, Mike? Nolan Smith, who's under contract a lot longer than Josh Sweat, as Josh Sweat is on a one-year deal, Nolan Smith could cut into his playing time.
That would be interesting. That would be, and look, by the way, Adam, that's a good thing. If they think, hey, we got to find ways to get Nolan Smith on the field, because a lot of people look at, hey, this guy was a first-round pick that they were excited about, made basically no to minimal impact last year.
None. I mean, Nolan Smith was only a special teams player. He wasn't given a chance to do it.
Oddly, he got a little bit extra playing time in the playoff game.
Because there was a reason for it, but I believe was there an injury? I remember that, but it might have been because it was a blowout. I think we probably went over that after that game, Mike. That was odd, but I think there was because the game was a blowout against Tampa, or somebody got hurt. But nevertheless, here's the thing about Josh Sweat. It's been a great story of development. Second half of last season was not good. They cut his pay, but they guaranteed his salary. It doesn't mean that he's going to play 90% of the snaps. He might wind up playing 60, maybe Nolan Smith plays 40. So this is something we're going to look at in training camp when we're there, what the rotation looks like.
I'm interested in that. That piqued my interest there from Darius there, bringing that up. He mentioned, by the way, before we get into some other breakout players that are on your mind, he did say something that I thought was interesting regarding Fangio and that, hey, he's a real quiet guy, yada, yada. And then at the end, he kind of threw in, if you're not playing well, he's going to sit you regardless of what your salary is. And I don't know if that was a little, shot over at his buddy across the way there that maybe they should have sat Bradbury last year, but salary indicated that he didn't sit. I thought that was kind of standoutish to me.
Well, yeah, but Bradbury did get benched. I mean, he got his playing time cut. So, yeah. But it's funny, if you really look at the veterans, I mean, who are the veterans that, remember, Fletcher Cox retired.
Yep.
What veterans are really there? Is Devin White is technically a vested veteran? Now, he's a guy I could see with the lack of discipline, overrunning plays, not being where he's supposed to. We know he's a good pass rusher, but he's there to make plays. If he does not make a play, sure, I could see him being benched. And by the way, I'm not saying like their inside backer group is going to be very good. They'll start two of them, but they have better players. Now we'll see how well that they play, and that's also going to be a good competition in training camp for that position.
All right, let's get a couple more. Now that we've been on the topic, of breakout players, surprise type of players, potential guys to keep an eye on this year, our listeners have been texting them in. Let's hear who you add to the mix.
All right, so Nolan Smith was my number 3. My number 2 guy is now a full-time starter at another position. Cam Jurgens now, it's his run. We know he only has 2 years of starting experience at center. That was in college. That's not here in the National Football League. This is his third year as an Eagle. He will now take over for Jason Kelce. He was the handpicked choice. It was never going to be Landon Dickerson. I don't know where that came from. People try to spread that rumor that was shot down by someone I asked with the Eagles over the years. So, no, it was always going to be Jurgens. Isaac Seumalo, though, many years ago was a guy they thought maybe, but Isaac was better off at guard, and he actually was the Steelers' highest-graded offensive lineman last season. But getting back to Cam Jurgens, really good athlete, super smart. The concerns are injury history, pretty big going back to Nebraska. But they're going to be growing pains with this, Mike, with Cam Jurgens. You're just going to have to accept not every snap's going to be great. He doesn't have the proven intelligence of Jason Kelce, which means seeing stuff before the snap, getting you out of a bad play and stuff like that, which is, he calling them protections and all that stuff. Jurgens will have to do it. He just doesn't have the experience doing it, and there's going to have to be some growing pains. But he's the long-term answer. And by the way, if he plays really well this season, you know what's coming. They'll be able to extend him after this season.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy, and I agree with you on Jurgens, is that, hey, the whole game changes for you now as the center, I don't want to say backing up, stepping in now as the new guy as opposed to being the right guard when you have that guy next year. Hopefully he rubbed off on him pretty good there. So, yeah, I would be in agreement on Jurgens as a guy. So who's at the top of your breakout list?
Yeah, just add to Jurgens. Look, if this was Jeff Statlin's guy, and you know that Kelce, by the way, was involved in that he got involved in terms of giving his opinion on Jurgens, and this is their handpicked successor, so I expect it to work. Now, the number one guy here it's sort of the obvious choice of the group, but let me explain why he's a breakout player. So Jalen Carter for a majority of the season looked like, wow, it's kind of like he looks like he could be a superstar. and then really dropped off, Mike, where he was a complete non-factor for the final quarter or so of the season. Tate wasn't very good. Look, their whole D-line was awful. I mean, the front seven really just regressed significantly. But my thing is with Clint Hurtt, the new D-line coach, one of the best in the NFL, the Seahawks thought so much of him. They promoted him from defensive line coach to coordinator. They're coming in with a new scheme there, so it didn't fit. So he's now in Philly. This guy is a disciplinarian, coaches hard. I expect these guys to respond. I'm expecting Jalen Carter. Look, there's no more Fletcher Cox there to turn to. It's got to be him. You notice I don't have Jordan Davis as a breakout player. I don't trust the conditioning. I know he's in good shape now. That's great. He fooled me last year, Mike, because I'd heard all sorts of stuff from people close to the situation, how great he was doing. And, yeah, he got off to a great start. He really did. Then he completely faded after like 5 games. But Jalen Carter's the guy, Mike. There's nowhere else to turn. He's got to be it. I feel strongly he could be better than Dexter Lawrence, who's a great football player. I'm not saying Aaron Donald, but a step below him. That's what he's got in his body. But it's really more up to him than the coaches. If he wants to be dominant and elite, he can do that.
That would be probably the biggest story for the Eagles, Adam, right? Is that can they find the guy who stepped right in and becomes what Fletcher Cox gave you for the last 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, he'll mostly play the 3 technique. I mean, they'll move him around, play that 4-eye. He'll play the 7 technique, which is the Calais Campbell position. He'll play mostly 3. He's so explosive. It is kind of fascinating. 2 former teammates, Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, playing together here. It's kind of crazy. But look, if Jalen Carter becomes an All-Pro this season, just think how much easier it makes it for Bryce Huff. If he's collapsed in the pocket, having an interior pass rusher, Mike, if you could have your druthers, you'd probably rather have an interior pass rusher like Cox than rather have, like Hassan Reddick. Not that Hassan Reddick was terrific. He was an All-Pro 2 years ago. But when you have an elite defensive tackle who could be a home wrecker, collapse the pocket, make the quarterback move off the spot, quarterbacks hate it when they can't step up. That would be absolutely huge if Carter could do this.
All right, let me get a little honorable mention, someone that maybe no one else is thinking of, because Slay gave me Nolan Smith, and I was mildly surprised here. Who do you got?
All right, this one is a real stretch, and people are like, there's no way. Let me just explain. I've got Zach Bonner as an honorable mention. Now, Zach has never been a starter in the National Football League. He was a pretty good pass rusher at Wisconsin. He played off-the-ball linebacker, outside linebacker, strong side linebacker for the Saints, mostly special teams player. Now, right now, again, we can only go by OTAs. They have him more. He didn't line up on the outside, from what I understand. It was mostly inside. He may not even win a starting job as one of the 2 inside backers, but if he does, Mike, I know coaches love guys who have size for that position, which he does, and he could blitz because Devin White can blitz. He's physical. He's a pretty sharp guy from what I hear. I'm just throwing this out there. If he winds up winning starting next to Devin White, or again, we don't, because Nakobe Dean was late. He's coming back from his foot surgery. He only got in late in OTAs. If Dean doesn't start and Bond does, this could be, and I'm not saying he's Andrew Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel had to play outside linebacker last season because the Dolphins had a lot of injuries, and that was a Fangio decision.
Yeah.
But maybe they do a little hybrid stuff with it. I'm intrigued by the signing. Obviously, somebody liked him, Mike. They just don't sign guys for the hell of it. Somebody in the Eagles personnel department really likes Zach Bond, and they may be onto something here. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Where Jalen Carter, I feel very strongly it'll happen because of the coaching. It's just that there's got to be a reason why somebody thought he could be a good football player for them.
Yeah, I know that some people are intrigued hearing his name. Is he going to be, what was the running back last year that Sirianni mentioned his name and he went to the Colts?
Trey Sermon?
Trey Sermon. Remember, Sirianni mentioned his name and people were like, oh, maybe Sermon has a role on this team, and he never quite stuck around.
He got hurt. He actually got hurt. He had a knee injury. We actually put this out. He got a knee injury. It was a 2 or 3 week injury. So they wave injured him, and he could have come back, but he went to Indy. By the way, Trey Sermon is going to be the Colts' number 2 running back this season, so it's too bad the Eagles couldn't get him back. But no, I get what you mean. Here's what happened with Trey Sermon, Mike. 2 years ago when they claimed him off waivers, apparently he was one of their best practice players in 22, and then they brought him back, and unfortunately he got hurt, and they could have used him last season, but oh well.
All right, man. Well, yeah, and they probably could use him this season too, because they don't have a lot of running back quality depth on the. I mean, I don't say quality depth. We don't know the quality of the depth, but there's a lot of unknowns at that position. We'll say, right?
I would say over on the football team, Mike. Yes, running back behind Barkley is Gainwell going to be the two. Will Shipley's a gifted back. Ty Davis-Price is a guy who's a third-round pick again, former third-round running back for the Niners. Eagles brought in. Then you look at the secondary. This is the deepest they've been in corner for years, but how good they are there. This is the real Fangio is here, so it's going to be a little different for them. The young kids now, they're very young up front, which is a good thing, but they're unproven. So, and then Bryce Huff, first time in his career as a full-time starter, Mike. It's funny, we talk about this. When Jeff and I put it together, our top 10 training camp questions, I just gave you 5 of them. I mean, that's where we are. Oh, one more thing. We taped this an incredible interview for our Patreon members with John DeFilippo, the former Eagles quarterback coach. You got to hear this. This was our best one we've done of like the 15 of them, just in terms of Hurts from last season, what they need to do to get him back on track, the number 3 receiver and the importance of it, which is going to be super important with this scheme because the third receiver in this offense will be used. We went over a lot of stuff. I thought it was fascinating. Patreon.com/Inside the Birds if you want to join.
I love the DeFilippo ones are some of my favorites.
Great guy.
He's really good. Yeah. Is he a guy? Is he trying to do some more broadcasting or what?
Well, yeah. I'm trying to get him in. I'm trying to get him in at Sirius NFL Radio with us. But John is because he did some stuff with him last fall. John, is the head coach for Memphis, the Showboats. And their team went great. But I'll tell you what, the UFL ratings, I cannot believe how good their TV ratings were. That kind of surprised me.
All right, man. Well, it's a happy hour Friday, always with Adam Kaplan for Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. You can get that on all podcasting platforms. And as he just said, the Patreon, and don't forget the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. Thanks, bud.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Kaplan, everybody, as we'll continue our look here as people continue to text in. Give me an Eagles player who you think will surprise this year. Darius Slay says he thinks Nolan Smith will surprise this year. Name one Eagles player who you think will surprise this season. 609-403-0973. I'm kind of intrigued to see. I'll give you, he gave us 3, and then the wild card he gave was Zach Bond, which good for him going way outside the box. I'll give you, somebody texted in Saquon Barkley. I actually kind of like Saquon Barkley. I don't know what everybody's expectations for Saquon is, but the other guy said Dallas Goedert. I like the Goddard one, too, because I think Goddard has been hurt, and because of that, his production has been down. But what about Nakobe Dean? Is he a guy that people have expectations for this year? I think Nakobe Dean's a guy that we have to do you want to say, I don't know how you even want to, what are the expectations for Nakobe Dean? I don't even know. I mean, his first year he didn't play. His second year he steps in as the starter and he gets hurt and basically is out. So would he be one of the guys? We're kind of on the air here, man. He just keeps walking in the room. Hey, I just completely lost my train of thought there for a second. What was I talking about? Oh, Nakobe Dean. That was wild. Guy just walked in. Did you guys hear that? He just fired off questions in the background. Yeah, I mean, Nakobe Dean is a guy that I think is almost like an afterthought now. He went from excited that he fell to you in the draft, hey, we got a linebacker, to getting hurt last year and kind of being out of sight, out of mind. So he would be a guy that I think would be in this conversation as a guy who would surprise. One other guy I guess you could throw into the mix would be Sidney Brown. Don't forget, Sidney Brown, 3rd-round pick, played a lot last year, ends up getting hurt, and now he's, hopefully back. He had the ACL problem. Is he going to be a factor? Is he going to play? Is he going to be the guy that's next to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? Is he going to be a player now in year number 2 that's going to be a impact type of player? Those are all things that I think, so Nakobe Dean, Sidney Brown. The third guy, I'll give you kind of my Zach Bond. He gave you Zach Bond as an honorable mention. So the third guy for me, and I really hope that this one hits. The other guys, yes, I hope Nakobe Dean hits. I hope Sidney Brown hits, obviously. But I really like Milton Williams, and I'm hoping that he surprises this year. And I don't even know what that means, because I don't know what kind of playing time he gets, what kind of role he has, all that kind of stuff. But those would be three guys that I think you could throw into this mix, much like, so Darius Slay said he thinks Nolan Smith will be the guy this year. Let's take a listen. Here's Darius Slay on the Green Light Podcast.
He looks a lot different this year. And one thing I can say about Nolan, ever since I met Nolan, he only know one speed. He one of the guys you got to watch out for your own self because he hit teammates and everybody. So even in practice, man, he's the guy that's going to run to the ball. He not a 10-yard guy. He more like, I'm trying to see ball, get ball. He's going to be a special year, man, for him this year, man. Especially after him running behind Hassan all year. I think it'll be very special.
And that part at the end, especially running behind Hassan Reddick all year, that he's going to be special. Man, that really adds some intrigue to me with Nolan Smith because I got to be honest, I had zero expectations for Nolan Smith entering this year. I'm just hoping that he gets on the field and contributes a little bit. Now, I think my expectations have changed considerably for Nolan Smith. And you might say, off of that, Darius Slay is a pretty impactful veteran player on this team. He says that Nolan Smith, who was the guy from the Broncos, and then he went to the Bills, the outside linebacker. Why is his name escaping me? Played for Denver for all those years, then he went to Buffalo. But Nolan Smith kind of reminded me of him coming out of the draft. I can't believe I can't think of his name right. Von Miller. Yeah, there you go. He reminded me a little bit of Von Miller. Is that like way off base to you?
I don't think it's off base only because of the fact that what is the reason why they drafted Nolan Smith? They drafted him to be a pass rusher. They didn't draft him to be a middle linebacker.
Von Miller's still playing, by the way?
He's under contract with the Bills, so I'm assuming he'll still play.
I know he was hurt, but I didn't know if he
was hurt last year.
Trying to come back or not. Yeah. He's like 35 years old.
Yeah. He's under contract with the Bills, so
I just didn't know if he decided to that's it.
Not yet. I mean, apparently I guess the podcast thing isn't good enough for him yet.
Von Miller, though, I don't know, maybe it's the glasses. They both wear those same similar style of glasses. But when he was coming out of Georgia, he kind of reminded me of Von Miller. Like that type of player.
I can see that because they both have a similar, they're not the same body type necessarily, but they have the same type of bend around the edge.
Well, 6'3", 250 for Miller, and Nolan Smith, 6'2", 230, 240. So they're very similarly sized. But just him at Georgia, when I watched him play at Georgia, he reminded me a lot of Von Miller.
He's an explosive attacking player like Von Miller. I think that's very fair.
Yeah, that was my kind of, comp to him.
Frankly, if he could be anything close to Von Miller, that's a home run.
No question. Jeez, Von Miller's a Hall of Famer, for God's sakes.
Super Bowl MVP.
Let's see. Defensive Rookie of the Year, check. One Defensive Player of the Year.
Yep.
Runner-up twice. AP first team 1, 2, 3, 4 times?
I think it's 4 times, yeah.
So, pretty darn good.
And remember, he's the reason why the Broncos won the Super Bowl over the Panthers. Peyton Manning didn't win that game, that's for sure.
8-time Pro Bowl, 3-time All-Pro, 2-time Super Bowl champ, Super Bowl 50 MVP, Hall of Fame All 2010 decade team. And yeah, if you end up getting that type of player from Nolan Smith, I'd be pretty shocked about that. But then he was just a comp that when he was coming out, that made me think of.
It's a fair comp because they're both players who attack when they blitz. They're not timid. They don't overthink it. They just go.
Mike, I always thought Dean was too small. I have no expectations for him at all. Go Birds. Yeah, Nakobe Dean is kind of small. That's fair. Eagles players I think will surprise, Mike. Jordan Davis, Sidney Brown, and when he comes back, Cam Jurgens. When he comes back, where'd he go? Am I missing something there? Did he get hurt? Is he gone? Oh, Sidney Brown when he comes back.
Oh.
Sorry, that's my fault. 2 points for that guy. He got me on that one. I thought he said Sidney Brown, and when he comes back, Cam Jurgens.
Oh.
I read it wrong. Sorry, dude.
Sidney Brown, yeah. Sidney Brown looked pretty good last year at times.
Yeah, he was on my list. I had Milton Williams, Sidney Brown, and Nakobe Dean. This guy says Milton Williams. We agree on that. How about Steen, right guard, important player, Matt and Kate May? Yeah, Steen's in the mix. I hope he surprises.
He is an important player, that's for sure.
A couple happy hour Fridays today. Give me some happy hour Fridays. 609-403-0973. Matt in Delhaven. Where's that?
Delhaven is just south of Courthouse. It's near, the Villas.
It says Salty Sailor just dropped today at the Tide.
Okay.
You know what that means?
Salty Sailor, that's at Slack Tide, yeah. I mean, that's one of those...
one of their, seasonals?
Seasonals, yeah.
Colin and Cape May Courthouse says, hey, Mike, happy hour Friday. I'm having a Mud Hen, Kitty Cats, and Fireworks Imperial IPA. It's a hell of a name. Kitty Cats and Fireworks. What is the genesis of that name?
I like the
picture. I like the picture. Yeah, Kitty Cats and Fireworks. It's an interesting name. All right. Give me an Eagle that's going to surprise this year. And give me a happy hour Friday pick for the day. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform. Just just follow us at 973 ESPN. Use the hashtag SBLive.
You're listening to the Sports.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Mike Gill.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. I can't see him, but he talks to me.
On 97.3 ESPN.
Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. The big news today, Harper and Schwarber both go on the injured list. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. We've been breaking down what that means moving forward. The lineup for the Phils, a little interesting tonight. Bryson Stott is now your leadoff hitter with Kyle Schwarber. That's a lot of home runs out of your lineup, by the way. A lot of home runs. Knicks Nuggets are brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Schwarber, Harper, they're out. And now the Phillies, by the way, they will not have them for the Braves series and the Dodgers series, most likely, before the All-Star break. So they're going to have to figure out a way to keep this team afloat without the two key cogs in the lineup.
What's going on, Mike? This is a big deal. Losing Harper and Schwarber to injuries. This is huge. And Rob Thompson today, he did mention, they are going on the 10-day IL, but they're saying the Harper injury is kind of like the Marsh injury, right? Like Marsh missed a couple of weeks when he went down. They're thinking the same thing here with Harper. So that's the good news, right? Like they're not going to be out for a while. That's huge because if you lose these two guys for an extended period of time, you start thinking in the back of your head, oh man, can those Braves catch up in the standings? So, my argument yesterday for the MVP, it took a little bit of a hit to Bryce Harper yesterday, Mike. I mean, after he gets hurt on the last play of the game, very tough to do. But, now we have a new lineup out there, and that's nugget number one for me, Mike. Stott's going to lead off. I don't know how much I love this. Stott's an okay leadoff hitter, right, in his career. He's had about 45 games at leadoff in his career in the major leagues from 22 to 23. This will be the first time this year he has been in the leadoff spot. I think they should have went Turner here. I know they don't want to take him out of the two-hole. He's been very effective this year. Fine. But Turner's a much better leadoff hitter. If you look at Stott's numbers, he's batting .263 career-wise at the leadoff spot in the first hole. His on-base percentage last year in the leadoff spot in 39 games was about .290. Not great. And he struggled a lot this year. Remember, he did have a kid this year. He had a child that was born, so I feel like that might play into a little bit of his struggles this year. I could. So we got to remember that, too. But he hasn't been the same at the dish this year. His at-bats have been confusing. His approach has been confusing. I don't love Stott to the leadoff, but he's one of the guys that is going to have to carry this team while these two guys are out. I mean, losing Schwarber and Harper, that's a gut punch right there. So I think Stott leadoff, not too in love with it. I would probably move him down to 2. I would try Turner at the leadoff spot. I think that just would make more sense.
Yeah, I agree in terms of the balance of the lineup, having Turner. Now, it might flip-flop. Who knows? Depending on, is Stott going to hit leadoff when there's a left-handed pitcher? That's another factor here. So is it going to be a different guy depending on what hand the pitcher is? Because Stott has not been in the lineup every day against left-handed pitching. He has struggled against left-handed pitching. Last year he hit better against left-handed pitching than he did right-handed pitching. 282 against 280. So it's a little disappointing that he's, like 230 this year against left-handed pitching. You also have the fact that, Marsh is in the 4-hole today. He also has not been playing every day, especially against left-handed pitching. So yeah, this is going to be a fluid lineup. Now, before the lineup came out and before the designations for Harper and Schwarber, I had wondered if they were going to play Bohm at first base almost exclusively and have Sosa become kind of the everyday third baseman, for the time being. We'll see how much first base Bohm now ends up playing.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of Alec Bohm at first base. I mean, I think that just makes the most sense, because then you could sneak Edmundo Sosa into the lineup over there at third. You don't have to worry about the left field thing with him anymore. So I think you'll see Bohm playing first base. Just starting the leadoff hole, I just don't love it, especially with how he's played this year. And the approach at the plate, he struggled offensively. But, he's a guy, when you bring up the point where he hasn't played a lot against left-handed starting pitchers, I just think that's a mistake. I mean, you're sending a guy like Nick Castellanos out there, right, every single day. He doesn't get a day off. He struggled mightily at the dish to start the season. He's still kind of coming around a little bit. But it's just confusing to me because Stott's such a young player, and you'd want him to get as many at-bats as possible because you want him to be an everyday player. That just has confused me from the get-go on why they take him out. I'm not a big fan of when they do that.
I can give you the answer. I can give you the answer if you want.
I know the answer, Mike. I think they should just continue to trot him out there and give him the at-bats. You're doing the same thing with Castellanos. You trot him out there every day. You want your young players to get at-bats, as many as they possibly can, to continue to grow early on in your career. That's why I think they should send him out. I know why they're not playing him. I just don't think it's the right call.
Yeah, Castellanos, the thing with Castellanos is they don't really have a lot of options out there. He is one of the few right-handed power bats they have. Bryson Stott, on the other hand, has struggled against lefties. They've put him out there a lot against lefties, and he hasn't turned the corner against them. So they do have other options to play second base. You can play Sosa. You can play Merrifield. The problem with Merrifield has been he hasn't been very good. So he's not an exciting option. But unlike Castellanos, who's one of the few right-handed guys in this lineup that can hit 25 to 30 home runs, in fact, he's probably the only right-handed bat in the lineup that provides that kind of power, I can see a little bit more with Stott. Stott has been very disappointing, and against lefties this year, he's been awful. So that's why Marsh doesn't play every day, and that is why Stott has been pulled back. Now, that being said, he's got to step it up. He's in the leadoff spot. Last year, he batted leadoff 39 games, and he hit 253 in the leadoff spot. His best spot in the order has been number 6, where he hit 357 last year. So this is a spot that he has hit before, 253, 290 on base. Those numbers are not great. He's going to have to be a lot better, and without Harper and without Schwarber, boy, they really need him to step it up.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like him, Castellanos, these are the guys that have to step up now with Harper and Schwarber being out. I mean, the power numbers are just gone. Schwarber's gone. Harper's gone. That's a leading MVP candidate right there. Schwarber, my estimation, one of the best leadoff hitters in baseball. I love Schwarber in the leadoff hole. So it pains me to see him go down as well as Harper. But when it comes to Stott, man, He's just struggled overall. I mean, even against righties, he's only batting 243. The numbers aren't great there either. So, he's struggled all together I mean, it's not just against lefties. Like, he struggled no matter how many times you trot him out there. That's why I want to give him more at-bats, right? Like, use the same kind of logic you have with Castellanos. Now, I get he's a right-handed hitter, a little different there, but a young player, I want to see him get as many at-bats as possible and chances to start every day because you want him to be your everyday second baseman. So that's just where I'm at there with Stott. But it's going to be fascinating because they're going to have to lean on their pitching.
Real quick on that. When he performed last year, they gave him that opportunity. He played 151 games last year. Why? Because he performed in them. You know, you're in a team where, unfortunately, there hasn't been, you know, Turner was hurt a lot. Harper's been awesome recently. Bohm has been very good, was early, then he slumped, now he's been better. But the back of your lineup has had a lot of inconsistencies, including Bryson Stott. He played 150 games last year. Why? Because he showed he deserved it. I don't feel like you should just hand the guy. If he can't hit left-handed pitching, you don't just get to keep going up there if you can't do it. You know, like, that is a hard skill. That is a very difficult thing to do. Brandon Marsh, people complained last night. I see, hey, smart move, Thompson. So Marsh had 4 hits the night before, so you sit him the next day. Yeah, because he can't hit lefties. He can't do it. His batting average tells you the story. And by the way, how many times do you see a team score 13 runs one night and then 0 runs the next? Just because you get 4 hits one day doesn't mean you're automatically back in the lineup the next day. He can't hit left-handed pitching. A dumb move would be putting Marsh in the lineup because he had 4 hits one day just because he had 4 hits. His batting average against lefties says, do not play him. It is not advantageous.
Yeah, I understand that with Marsh, but the numbers with Stott, I mean, it's only 4 points off, right? Like, against right-handed pitching, he's batting .243, and against lefties, he's batting .239. It's been all together. That's why I think you should just
but
get him out there.
But they have been just doing this recently. They didn't start this all. No, not all year. He's been playing against lefties for Bryson Stott this year. He's been hitting. They just kind of started in the recent last couple of weeks of not playing him. And even some lefties, he is playing it. It's not like it's he's not in a straight platoon like Marsh is pretty much in a straight platoon, not Stott.
Yeah, no, I just don't think they should go down that road with Stott. That's all I'm saying. I don't think they should go down the platoon route. And you can't now because of the injuries. You can't go down the platoon route. He's got to play every day.
Well, I think the difference is
guys on the dish.
He's not in a platoon. He's not sitting against every lefties. But here's the problem. He is not producing. So I have to find other ways to get some of these guys playing time. And if I keep putting you out there against lefties and you're not producing, now I got to start finding ways to get Sosa more at bats. Merrifield has been such a disappointment, but I got to try to find ways to get him at bats. So if you're not going to produce, I got to find at bats for these guys.
Yeah, I just think those at bats should go to Stott. Sosa I can understand, but Merrifield, he's just been brutal. So we'll see how it shakes out. Stott's in the leadoff hole tonight, and we'll see what happens. All right, let's move to nugget number 2 quickly here. The rumors are continuing to swirl with the 76ers, and Klay Thompson's name's heated up, Mike. It's heating up around the Sixers right now. I got to ask, Thompson had a down year last year, still averaged 18 points, 38% from beyond the arc as well. How long would you sign Klay Thompson for? Because he had the injury history, right? Like, is it a 1-year prove-it deal if you go after and get Klay Thompson? And how much money? You're going to give him the max, like the $40 million for a Thompson next year? I wonder how they go about this if they do go that route, because then you're saying, all right, we're going to fill out the rest of the roster with a bunch of other guys.
So we talked about this with Paul Hudrick on Wednesday. And by the way, Devon Givens tonight at 5 o'clock. We'll talk some Sixers with us. Paul brought up because free agency starts Sunday. All right. Yep. The draft's over. They didn't make any deals. So now what? Okay. One of the avenues is the balloon deal, meaning you're going to sign a veteran player, overpay him for a short amount of time so you can get out of that deal and get back into cap space again next year. That would be the Klay Thompson thing. Hey, Klay, how about a 1+1? We'll give you 1 year and then a team option for the next year. So if you play really well, we'll bring you back. will overpay you to come play here, would you do that? And that's going to be, I think, if they can't get Paul George, if they can't get crafty and find a trade, is it Brandon Ingram? Is it Lauri Markkanen? Is it somebody we haven't heard of? Is it Donovan Mitchell? Jimmy Butler seemingly doesn't want to be traded now. You seem like the trade market is drying up a little bit there. So then the next avenue becomes, we go overpay with all our cap space. Maybe they give $20 million to Klay Thompson, $20 million to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and $20 million to a third guy, and then bring some of their own guys back. Your Batum, your Oubre, and that, crew of guys. So, yes, I think Klay Thompson would be in play. I see a couple names. The kid Okoro, who just opted out of his deal in Cleveland, who I actually like, wouldn't excite people,
Mike,
but that's the road.
Got a little nugget, a little breaking news nugget here. Adrian Wojnarowski, the Charlotte Hornets are waiving Seth Curry. Would you be interested in his services again? I mean, he had a down year last year, but we remember he was a very important player before he was traded in the Ben Simmons deal. He had a lot of threes where he just couldn't play a lick of defense. He's going to be 34 heading into next season. I mean, you could probably get him on a cheaper deal, maybe to come off the bench, hit some threes for you. I don't know. Could be an option out there.
Yeah, I liked him when he was here. I think since the trade, he's kind of gone downhill a little bit. You know, I don't know when he was here, he was a really productive player, and it kind of sucked to see him go. But I don't know that he does much. Last year, 32% from three. It seems like he might be hitting the end of the road. Look, if you can get him on a similar type of deal that you got Oubre, right? If he wants to come in and just come back here, maybe. But I don't. I mean, Brooklyn, he didn't do much there. Charlotte, he did very little. I think since he's left here, he's been kind of a. Now, you want to pair him and Klay to make him feel good that Klay will have a Curry next to him? Okay.
Yeah, there you go. They can sway Klay Thompson here, right? You bring in the real, maybe the real Curry you bring in. You really Seth Curry, who's had I think at times, I don't know if he still does, has had a better career 3-point percentage than Seth, something like that. There was some crazy stat I remember reading about his brother. But, hey, I mean, it's just something that they could do if they want to, fill out a bench, fill out a roster spot, give him the vet minimum. I mean, that's a guy who was very productive here, hit some big shots, just can't play defense. That's the only liability there with Seth Curry. He'll come off the bench, maybe hit a three for you.
Doesn't do much for me. No, we got to quit going down the road of bringing guys back who are older and not the same players.
We're going to go down that road anyway with some of these older guys. Paul George, Jimmy Butler, all the names a bit older, better than Seth Curry. Obviously, he's a rotation player, but something to keep your eye on. Sunday night, remember, Mike, set those alarms, 5:55, 5:56, 57, 58, 59, just so you're ready to go to get those alerts at 6 o'clock. All right, final nugget number 3 before we get out of here. Mike, they announced the Kelly Green dates this year for the Eagles. I don't know if you saw this.
I did see this. Yeah, I did see it.
Yeah, week 9 against the Jaguars and week 17 versus the Cowboys. Finally, they're doing it against a division opponent. They got half of this right? I think they should wear them more. Wear them more than twice a year. I mean, people love the Kelly Greens. I know you and your uniform thing. You're not a big uniform guy. Do you like the Kelly Greens? I never got that answer out of you.
I'm not a big fan. The Kelly Greens do nothing for me. The Kelly Greens, to me, represent the worst era of Eagles football for the most part. Why does everybody want to go back to when you were a losing franchise?
Oh, no.
The Kelly Green.
They look clean, Mike. They look clean. It's not about that.
No, I don't think the look is all that great. I mean, it's.
What?
Nah, I'm not big into the Kelly Greens. And by the way, I think they picked the right two teams. Doug Peterson coming back in here, and you get him back, and then the Cowboys. So, yeah, you're going to add extra buzz to two games that are already going to have buzz to them.
I'll be honest, I wish they wore them against the Giants. I think that would be really cool. If the Giants wore their throwbacks and the Eagles wore the throwback Kelly Greens, I think that would have been, do more than two. More than 2 games I would like. I think 3, 4, I think that would be fantastic.
Well, I mean, at this point, why don't you just change your uniforms?
That's what I'm saying. Now, would you be against them making it the primary? Because I think they should make it the primary.
No, I don't want I like the midnight green better than the Kelly Green.
No, the Kelly Greens, the aura around the Kelly Greens. They're nice, they're slick, they're clean. I love the Kelly Greens.
I gave you the aura. You're not old enough to remember that they sucked in those uniforms. They were awful. They were bad football teams in those uniforms. That's what I say. It's just like a nostalgia thing for some people that hey, the Kelly Green, I like the color. It's like, why did you pick that team to win the NCAA tournament? Well, they had the cooler uniforms. The Eagles were not a good team when they wore the Kelly Greens. The best era of football that they've ever given you has been out of those garbage uniforms. Get out of those uniforms and stop hoping they come back.
No, you see, they're a different version of the Kelly Green now, Mike. It's a different little bit different style that they're wearing with it, and it's different players now. Yeah, Jeffrey Lurie's still the owner. Howie Rose was still the GM. It's not going to bring bad luck. It looks great. It looks slick. Bring back the Kelly Greens full time, Mike. I'm against you on this one.
Yeah, that's all right. I know a lot of people love the Kelly Greens. I'm out. And by the way, I am uniform thing. I'm very big on the uniforms. I think that they're very important. They are your brand and everything. What I don't like is these teams are bringing in so many different uniforms. They're losing their identity of who they are and what what the uniform represents to these organizations. It's like, you're the Lakers. Your uniform is yellow. You don't wear a white uniform all of a sudden. You're the Lakers. You don't need to do some stupid all city or crap like that. You're the Lakers. Be the Lakers.
And you can bring back the throwbacks in there. Bring back the throwbacks. You don't like the powder blues either. It's crazy. It's crazy. Powder blues, Kelly Green, bring them all back to me. Bring them all. I love them all.
Now, what ends up happening is they come back, they're cool for a flash in the pan, and then, just like they did back then, they got old.
Yeah, it'll be funny. But
everybody back then, you probably don't remember this. A lot of teams wore the powder blues. The St. Louis Cardinals wore the powder blues. The Montreal Expos wore the powder blues. The Cubs wore the powder blues. No, I'm talking about in baseball. A lot of teams, the Toronto Blue Jays wore the powder. The powder blue was like the road uniform throughout the 70s and 80s. Everybody wore a powder blue instead of gray. And then the uniform kind of switched from the teams that wore the powder blue for the road went to gray.
And I say bring them both back. Bring them all back. Gray's boring. Bring back the powder blue. It's a cooler color. It's more bright. It's more positive, Mike. We got to bring back the
This is a message to all baseball fans and people out there. A baseball team that wears any other pant than a white pant or a gray pant is not a real baseball team, all right?
I kind of agree, but the powder blue is a little different. You can sneak a powder blue in there, Mike. There's nothing wrong with that.
Special day. You want to sneak it in for a special day? Have at it. You don't need to switch. Yeah.
Every game, every day. All right, that's my final nugget. Also tomorrow, before I go, locker room. We got Aiden Miller on the show tomorrow, Mike. Big one.
Wow, Aiden Miller. Don't trade him. Keep him.
Keep him on. I can't wait for that conversation with Aiden. It's going to be fantastic. Phil's number 2 prospect.
All right, check that out tomorrow morning in the locker room. He's the producer, Nick Earnshaw. Check out the podcast, The Shift, as well. Do yourself a favor and check out the podcast, The Shift, for more baseball conversation. All right, Nick, we'll talk to you Monday, man. Have a good night. All right, good weekend. All right, there's Nick's Nuggets. They're brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Coming up, Devon Givens talks a little Sixers with us. All right, he's going to paint the offseason picture. What does he anticipate seeing? He joins me next on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973.
Jersey. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Now live from inside the Ocean Casino Resort Studio, here's Mike Gill.
When they have needed him to be at his very best, he's either been banged up or he hasn't been as good as he was in the regular season. That's not every night. He's had some playoff games where he's been dominant, but it's been very inconsistent. And more importantly, he's never been 100%. And that's got to change if they want to, as you say, get over the hump.
Tim Legler said that about Joel Embiid. That's the biggest one. Joel Embiid's health has been the problem. But right now, what is Joel Embiid even going to play with? Let's map it out. Devon Givens, PHLY, covers the 76ers. Those guys have been busy with a lot of content for you over at PHLY Sixers on their YouTube channel. What's next for the Sixers? Let's bring in Devon Givens here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, man. What's going on, buddy?
How you doing, man? Good to be with you as always. Sorry we couldn't do this via the video, but Philadelphia traffic is something else.
Well, People sitting in traffic, they want answers, man. And let's first quickly get your thoughts. I mean, you get a guy at 16, you get the center in the second round. Do you look at this draft and put the pieces together for anything else, or was there not a lot of clues on what could happen on Sunday?
I think more of the clues were, Mike, with this particular draft was starting number one with the fact that they actually drafted at pick number 16 and 41, selecting Jared McCain and Adem Bona. And with that, it means that they're going to probably have to look towards something via the trade, but they probably keep these two guys in the fold and have them go along with you. That's at least how I see it as of right now. And, these things can change very, very quickly in the NBA. So the picks themselves, adding some more depth to the roster, two young players, will they be part of the rotation? That's something that Nick Nurse is going to have to figure out, and that'll certainly play itself out more once we do realize what they do have on the roster, beginning with how things begin on Sunday at 6 o'clock.
Sunday, 6 o'clock. Let's fast forward a little bit, Devon. You just mentioned the two rookies. They did make those picks. So who is going to be in addition to those players? The Paul George stuff, let's start there. That seemed to be the big name. It seemingly that name's been around for a while. Where are we 48 hours ahead of the potential to sign Paul George?
He has not done anything yet, right? He hasn't re-signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. He has a deadline tomorrow himself, a personal deadline, to opt in or out of that $48 million contract that's attached to him, and we'll know better. But even though with so many things going, smoke screens here, smoke screens there, until he does something, signing with the Clippers, maybe opting in and getting traded elsewhere, the opportunity is still there for Paul George, because when you look at the availability of him being a free agent or even being opting into that number and asking for a trade, not too many people can absorb that, of course, $48 million contract, and unless they really want to get rid of some of the players that are on their roster. And in the Sixers case, it might be a little bit different. So I still say, and we all have said this on the show, even though they're not with us right now, Mike, we've all agreed that there's still a window that is open. The percentage is not as high as it once was when it appeared that he was just going to flat out opt out and become an unrestricted free agent. But until there is a resolution, there's still a decent enough chance that he could be a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. Will that happen? I don't know. The percentage is much lower than it was, but there's still a window open. It's not all the way shut.
Is that, in your mind, and should it be Plan A?
That has always been Plan A, yes. Even with the Jimmy Butler part, you would probably put those two together, and then you would look at some that maybe you didn't think that were realistic opportunities, like Lauri Markkanen and Utah, Mikal Bridges, now a member of the New York Knicks. Those are two that you really didn't expect to happen without having to give up so much. And the grab bag that we saw that New York had and were willing to do that, that's why they did it. Same could be said for a team that maybe approaches the Utah Jazz and Danny Ainge about Lauri Markkanen. But with those two not knowing that they were available, it was always Paul George and Jimmy Butler in the top tier, and then you see where others fall into place with some names I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah, we're talking with Devon Givens, PHLY 76ers. Their off-season can begin on Sunday at 6. Paul George's name, you mentioned Butler. He seemingly is out of it. All right, Brandon Ingram, his name keeps coming up. Seemingly people aren't all that excited about him. Should they be?
The excitement, of course, wears off with a name like Brandon Ingram because of the names that we just talked about, Paul George and Jimmy Butler being that top tier of, wow, there's a little bit of a possibility that the 76ers can land them. So, of course, no one is going to be all that interested in Brandon Ingram. But when you do look at him, a player that is a wing positional player that they desperately need, someone who can score. And we've seen him average 24.5, 25 points at one point when he made his lone all-star team a few years ago, putting up about 6 3-pointers a game. That's a pretty good player that you can plug in the Sixers lineup between Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. So as much as people want to just look at it and kind of wave it off, just look at the guy for what he is, and that's an offensive player. Sure, it's not the volume of 3-point attempts that you would like, but the scoring ability. They need someone who can put points on the board consistently. And I've seen some that have compared him to Tobias Harris. That is not the case. He's a way better player than Tobias Harris, with all due respect to Harris, who I have given credit to in the past for the things that he has done. But let's be realistic. When we're looking at Harris versus what Ingram is as a scorer and the defense, there is some question marks there for him. But one thing that I always say, too, Mike, is when players play with Joel Embiid, that's a different type of big man, a different type of player that you're playing with. So the looks might be so much better playing next to Joel Embiid and, again, including Tyrese Maxey, where we might see the best version of Brandon Ingram, including the fact that he's on the final year of his deal. So you know as well as I do, and many others listening and watching, that, hey, guys on their expiring contract, you only get the best of them.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting one for me, Ingram. I mean, you talked about the volume of three-pointers, and that's is the perplexing part about that. It's like, why is that number kind of down? Is he the right guy? As you mentioned, you don't get to play with Joel Embiid everywhere. So would he be the kind of guy that can, like, do you look at his Embiid as a guy who can unlock things from guys and pull more out of them?
I do. I'll give you a couple of examples. Well, let's start with Tobias Harris. As good as he was in L.A., we did see some really good ones there with him, some good opportunities for him. He didn't take advantage of them, but how many times was it us looking at him playing the game saying, you should have shot that basketball? It was a good look, right? The ball swung to him, and a lot of that is because the attention that's on the floor is geared towards Joel Embiid. Then you'll go to a different position for two players coming in having career years with Joel Embiid. J.J. Redick, Seth Curry. In their time out there on the floor with Joel Embiid, the best careers that they had, seasons that they've had in their careers playing off of what he was doing. So, yes, I do think that there's an opportunity, as much as there are flaws that we can point out. And listen, I think you and I are both always honest when we give our assessment of players, games, etc. He's not a perfect player, but he is a player that can score. And I would be really intrigued to see him playing again off of the big fella, to see how he would get to his spots. And then another piece, looking at him playing in a Nick Nurse offense where I've seen Pascal Siakam do some really good things as a swing type of player, a wing player, in that same kind of mold, bigger body, but a similar type of mold where he likes to live in that mid-range area, playing with his back to the basket a lot of times, not hoisting a lot of three-pointers, can take players off the dribble. The other part is just him simply being engaged and locked in at all times. But when you're playing and if the ball's swinging to you unselfishly from Maxey and Embiid, I think those shots will be there for him and you get good results. I think Sixers fans will be just fine.
All right, Devon, let's look at that next guy, group of guys, I guess. You got your Klay Thompsons, your DeMar DeRozans, guys who are maybe not the same players they were, but still pretty good players. We were talking about this on Wednesday's show, regarding, do you have to do the balloon payment, overpay for some guys, give them a lot of money for a short amount of time, and then put yourself back into free agency, in a year or two?
Sure. Right. Yeah. I like the DeRozan name more than a lot of people, including my partners on the PHLY Sixers podcast, Derek Bodner and Kyle Neubeck. I like him a little bit more. I've always liked DeMar DeRozan. And yes, we just talked about Brandon Ingram, a similar player who lives in the mid-range area. And that's what we know of DeMar DeRozan. Same numbers from behind the three-point line. Not enough volume there, but the guy's a flat-out scorer. And if you're asking for the roles of what Maxey and Embiid are going to give you, maybe you can live with someone like DeMar DeRozan with the defensive efficiency, the lack of three-point attempts, because he's still going to give you about 20, 22 at night. And, oh, by the way, there's another player that you have on your roster that could be an end-game closer for you when the attention is going the other way. And if he's going off, do you get single coverage on Tyrese Maxey from time to time? If he's going off, are you going to get that easier opportunity for Joel Embiid to do his work? And I think that is something that could be there. You can hide him a little bit more on defense, and he's a savvy enough guy, veteran, that has played in this league a long time, where you will be able to get away with it with him on the floor with those defensive efficiencies, because he's also going to give you what he's going to give you on the offensive end and make up for it. So I like the DeRozan name a little bit more. Yes, it will be a bit of a balloon payment, as you mentioned. Are we looking at 2 years, somewhere in that 50 to 60 range? Can you live with that? I think I could. The Klay Thompson part, I'm pretty much out on that one.
Out on Klay Thompson. All right. More interested in DeMar DeRozan. Let's, the possibility of a trade is, if you could try to explain it to some of the listeners, how that could occur. They have no one on the roster. You do have a lot of assets moving forward, but if you're going to get a player here that you think can help you, it's got to be dollar for dollar, generally 3-team deal. Or what about a Tobias Harris sign and trade? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, but of course they have to play the game, Tobias Harris and his camp, to make sure that they are landing in the spot that is more favorable to them than it is necessarily for the Philadelphia 76ers. So unless it is a place like Chicago that Tobias Harris wants to go to, why would he do business with you and go to a place? Is he more driven for the situation? Is he driven more towards the money part of things? I don't know how that will work at this point. Tobias Harris is a great guy. Again, his representation and his camp, maybe they will look at it and say we can do business with the Sixers to find a better situation for us. But I don't know that I see that one playing out all that much, because even with the names that we have talked about, they may not be looking for Tobias Harris. So Chicago, does Tobias Harris want to go there? Probably not. He probably wants to, if he's still driven by winning, why would he want to go to Chicago? And we talk about New Orleans. Yeah, there might be a spot for him there, but if they're moving Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy is taking that spot. Herb Jones is also going to be a starter there. Zion Williamson, that's in the front court. Where does he fit in that piece? So I don't know where that would work for both sides, because I don't know that there would be a sign and trade situation where a player coming back here taking Tobias' spot, in essence, basically doing that. If they're doing just that, how would that work out? I don't know that would be the case.
All right.
Unless there's some sort of 3-team deal that I don't know about.
Yeah. And that's the question I get a lot is, when you're trying to work a trade and you're the Sixers, you have no one on the roster. How will Daryl Morey approach, making a deal, or is he going to have to do all his work in free agency?
Well, because they do have the space, up to $64 million they can have this offseason, renouncing some rights, or you have the draft picks that you can move, maybe a pick or two in the deal to also make it work in that way. So with the fact that they don't have anybody on their roster absorbing that contract coming back in, I would imagine that if you're making a deal with New Orleans, though, they are going to want somebody, and that's where that third team might have to come into play.
Yep, that's where you might be out on some of these things. So there's a lot, obviously, on some of those names. There's not that big name guy. You got this next group of guys. Are any of the guys like, a Derek Jones or, Drummond's name's been mentioned because of the center position. Okoro just, he just opted out there. So is there any other guys that you guys have discussed that you like as a fit? Caldwell Pope obviously is another guy who fits in that mold.
That's the number one name that we've discussed over the last part of this week, where Kentavious Caldwell Pope opting out of his contract with the Denver Nuggets and becoming an unrestricted free agent. That's one that, when you talk about the balloon payment, Mike, that they may look to go in that direction. Money there for him. Guy who's won 2 championships, played with 2 superstars, 2 former MVPs, and Nikola Jokic and LeBron James. He knows his role. He's a winning basketball player in that way. He's won. And you look at that and you say, okay, that's one that could work. We've also talked about a name that's a little bit maybe under the radar, Najee Marshall, a wing player for the New Orleans Pelicans. Still some upside there, even at the age of 26, coming off the bench because of Ingram being in front of him, C.J. McCollum in that starting unit, Zion Williamson, mentioning Brandon Ingram already, where maybe there's a chance that he's the type of player that you could look at and say that his volume, the way he shot the ball last season from beyond the three-point line, his defensive acumen that he has shown to be a very good on-ball defender, and you certainly need that in your starting unit. Could you give him his first big contract? Not too big, of course, probably talking somewhere in that $8 to $10 million a year range, where you get him on a long-term deal, and you're betting that he is going to continue to get better playing in a situation like this with Maxey and Embiid, and finding a piece. As we talk about building out the team, that's a really good piece to have as a wing player, 6'6", long arms, very, very engaged defensively, can cause some problems for offensive players if he's locked in, and knocking down those outside shots, not afraid to put the ball on the floor. I think that's a name that could be intriguing if the 76ers look that way.
You know, Devon, 6 o'clock Sunday, are you intrigued, excited to see what, like, there's a lot of, questions about what could happen here. Do you think that something that's completely not being discussed is the possibility? Because it doesn't sound a whole heck of a lot like there's a, other than Paul George, okay, maybe that's plan A, but how realistic does that sound? So it seems that if something, and I bring it up in this way, because as you know, your cousin over there just left and went to the Knicks, and then they brought in OG Anunoby as well. That team has taken a significant step. You got the championship Celtics here. So is there anything they can do to close the gap on those two teams? Because to me right now, they are miles apart from those two.
They are. And maybe, you might have a different opinion once we see things play out. Starting on Monday, if there's some players now on the roster, you only have 6, including the 2 draftees from Wednesday and Thursday, rounds 1 and 2. And you're right, New York making those 2 moves, certainly improving their basketball team. Their depth right now looks to be unbelievable, but how does the Julius Randle thing play out? Is that a name that we haven't heard about that could be moved because of the addition of Mikal Bridges and the re-signing of OG Anunoby? And as you said, intrigued, excited, all of those things. I'm all of the above, and part of it is because as much as you feel like you have a good handle on things and you get good information, did anybody really see the Knicks and trade for Kale coming? Because there's always something that comes out of the blue, right, Mike, that you just don't see and you don't know, and they've done a really good job of keeping things tucked away that it's not leaking out, and New York did just that. Now, sure, you've heard some rumblings and all of that, but is there something else that we don't know, a name that we haven't seen, that the player requests the trade because he's unhappy in his situation? That always happens where you're like, oh, man, I didn't see that one coming. So I wait to find out about something like that to see where, if any of those things, what happens with Zach LaVine. I doubt it's here in Philadelphia, but does that cause a trickle effect in another situation where he may land that makes someone else become available? So you do have to catch up to Boston and New York for the things that they did. Adding Kale just simply makes them so much better, and it's adding to their depth overall with New York. There's no way that the Sixers are going to sit on their hands and not do anything. On draft night on Wednesday, they believe that when they start the season that they have the chance to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. Well, you've got to show and tell once things get underway on Sunday evening.
No doubt about it. Yeah, that's the thing is, right now, and you're right, anything can come out of right field. Anything can kind of just be like, whoa, I didn't see that happening. But the moves that are in front of your face doesn't seem like there's a move that can close the gap. That's all, right? I mean, I don't see, even adding Paul George, where does that put them?
I still think that puts them in the mix because it may make things a little bit easier when you add a wing player with the defensive reputation that he has, although it's not the same as when he was 27. He's still a smart player, knows where to be, can still defend a little bit enough, even at the age of 33, 34 right now, where his shooting, his offensive play, he was an all-star all-star conversation again a season ago, and the type of player that's still a cornerstone, at least where the Clippers want him back as his cornerstone piece, just at the price that they want, not his. So he's still valuable enough. You don't have that on your roster. You haven't had that on your roster. Even at his age, you still haven't had that on your roster over the past couple of seasons, arguably since Jimmy Butler left in the summer of 2019. So, yes, you can do that, but then you start to put those other pieces around. Does acquiring Paul George now in a sign and trade possibly, or getting Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Najee Marshall, it makes your defense better. You have wings now. You have some switchable wings, some versatile wings to add to your basketball team to make your lives easier for both Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. So he does. And even with Brandon Ingram, again, a guy who can score 20-plus, can go off of 40 at any given time and do so many different things with his versatility as a scorer where once you know that one is locked in place, now we can go acquire those other pieces, including bringing back a couple of players from last season's roster that will fit overall. Remember, when DeAnthony Melton was a part of that starting lineup before his back injury started to flare up again, they were a top 5 net rating team in the NBA, Mike, one of the best teams in the NBA. They didn't have really a third star. If they do that here and find that player, Paul George, Brandon Ingram, someone else, to fill that role, then I think they will still be in a pretty good spot, and they'll be in year 2 of Nick Nurse's offense.
Real quick, of the guys that are free agents that they can bring back, are there any that you think will definitively be back, that they definitely want back?
If I had to rubber stamp it, I would say Nick Batum and Kyle Lowry would be back, with a really good chance of Kelly Oubre also being back as well.
All right, so Oubre would be the interesting one there. Buddy Hield, obviously, who they traded for. A lot of people don't seem to think that he's in their mix here. And then the 2 older veterans, Batum and Nick Lowry. On Monday, are we excited about what happened?
Yes. I would say yes, because they have to. If they're going to be the best team in the Eastern Conference, they know they have to do something in order to keep pace with the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks, maybe the Milwaukee Bucks, Cleveland Cavaliers, etc. No disrespect to the Indiana Pacers. They have to do something. They created this cap space for a reason. They're still decent players, maybe not the ones that you thought, but they're still decent players. Everyone has warts. No one is perfect. There are weaknesses with every player. That I do think that they do something where you're feeling better about your basketball team on Monday.
All right, there's Devon Givens, PHLY Sixers. A lot of coverage from those guys for free agency, which begins on Sunday night at 6 o'clock. What do you guys got planned for free agency here?
We begin our free agency show on Sunday beginning at 5 p.m., and we're going to carry on for a few hours, and hopefully, as we just talked about, being excited about things on Monday, the Sixers make some moves that make Sixers fans very happy and give us something to talk about beginning at 5 on Sunday evening.
Well, we'll be keeping an eye on that. And, of course, the crew over at PHLY, they do a great job. Check out their YouTube show. 5 o'clock Sunday, getting you ready for the Sixers and NBA free agency. Thanks, buddy.
Always. Appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
All right, Devon Givens at _Devon Givens. And, that crew of Derek Bodner, Kyle Neubeck, and Devon Givens do a really good job of covering the 76ers. It's probably the best crew, team of Sixers beat guys out there that are all on one platform. Devon does a great job as well here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and streaming live video on the X platform at 973 ESPN. It's easy to find. All you got to do is use the hashtag SBLive to find the show. Coming up, Keith Smith, SpotTrack.com, the front office podcast. He's going to give us some insight on the rest of the league. Who's going where? When's it going to happen? How aggressive will Daryl Morey be? What did the Knicks do? And how can the Sixers do something to kind of close the gap on them and Boston, all that and more. Coming up with NBA writer from SpotTrack.com, Keith Smith, next on the Sports Bash.
We have the perfect.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Traffic. You come with me. The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.
Sports Bash Live. Happy Hour Friday, everybody. NBA free agency, 6 o'clock Sunday night. The Sixers seemingly don't have a lot of roads to travel down. We'll get that and more. Keith Smith, SpotTrack.com. He joins me now with a look at what could be happening on Sunday at 6 When we're here on Monday, Keith Smith, do you think we will have a lot of fireworks to discuss, or do you think that this free agent season will be a little slow?
No, I think we're going to see stuff come right out of the gate. This new rule where teams can negotiate with their own free agents has already changed things. We've seen several guys reach agreements to re-sign, but what we've also seen is a lot of guys, I think, now know, all right, I know what's out there for my team. Let me go find something better somewhere else. And I think that's going to lead to some stuff coming out right away, maybe signings, maybe big trades. But I think it's going to be busy starting right out of the gates Sunday night. I've been talking with some teams that, let's all be grown-ups, let's all be honest, teams that talk to other guys too. So they have some idea of, all right, this guy's kind of interested, let's focus in. What they don't need is, hey, don't put the agreement out here days in advance. Don't put the complicated transactions out there. But everybody knows everybody's talking. So I think it's going to be busy Sunday night.
Keith, and I know you guys had your show over on the front office show earlier today. I would imagine the guy at the top of that list is Paul George, and everybody's waiting to see what happens. What is the feeling that Paul George would like to do and what will happen? I mean, we've been hearing his name here since like Christmas. His name came up. It almost seemed like a fait accompli. And in the last 72 hours or so, it almost seemed that that's not even, on his mind at this point. Where does everybody think he will be come Monday?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got off the phone with someone just a little bit ago. And one of the things that they said was if Paul George opts out, then there's a good chance one of the cap space teams, whether that be Philadelphia or Orlando, Oklahoma City, one of those teams, maybe Utah was also thrown out there, but I think that's more speculation because they're a cap space team. But maybe one of those teams is making a run at Paul George because him opting out doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for him to kind of open up his market to go to a lot of other places. If he opts in here by tomorrow, then that tells us a couple things. One, either he is still working on a long-term deal with the Clippers and because he can still extend with them, or he's looking at, all right, I opted in to open up my trade market. The Golden State Warriors have been very heavily mentioned as interested in trying to put something together with Paul George. They also pushed back Chris Paul's contract guarantee deadline by a couple days till after they'll know if Paul George is a free agent or not. So there could be something going on there. And also, the Denver Nuggets were in on maybe trying to look at a way to get Paul George. It's very complicated because it was going to cost them Michael Porter Jr. and other players. And then one of the things that was said was the Nuggets did not want to meet the Clippers asking price of a bunch of draft picks. So this is all still very, very fluid with him.
Is there anything that happened draft night that you kind of said, how does that impact what happens on Sunday?
Not in like a major way necessarily where it's like, oh my gosh, this team cleared a ton of cap space or anything like that. But there were a couple things. The Kings made a trade where they got off a good amount of money, which got them into a position where now all of a sudden they have a lot of flexibility around the tax apron, and they didn't do that for no reason. So that tells me they might have something going on. They've been linked to Kyle Kuzma. They've been linked to Zach LaVine. We could see them make a big play here because as much as I'm sure they kind of like Jalen McDaniels, they definitely did that trade with the Toronto Raptors to get off of some additional salary. So I've got my eyes on them for sure because they're at least a very interesting team that could be in play here with a couple major guys.
All right, what is the thought about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? He declined a pretty hefty player option to become a free agent. So what are some of the buzz surrounding Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? I mean, and I don't know, is he one of the more intriguing players come Sunday?
Yeah, initially the thought was he was probably going to decline that option, but just go right back to Denver on a new contract. Now the news is that may not be as locked in stone. And Calvin Booth said draft night, I think it went a little missed by folks, but that's fine because it came out at like 1:30 in the morning Eastern. When he was asked about Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, he said, of course, we'd like to have him back, but we'll be okay if he leaves, and then went on to talk about how good Christian Brown is. So that is telling me the Nuggets are at least prepared for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to walk. Denver moved off of Reggie Jackson's contract in a salary shedding move with the idea to, I think, maybe open up the full non-taxpayer MLE if that's the direction they want to go, so because they created some room under the tax apron. So there's going to be, some question about, all right, where's Denver going? As far as Caldwell Pope, Philadelphia, Orlando. I've even heard maybe Utah. Those are teams that are interested. Dallas is interested, but that one's a little bit harder. They can't offer him quite as much. So I think he's more in play than we would have thought even just a couple of days ago.
All right. Keith Smith, SpotTrack.com. The NBA free agent period opens on Sunday night, right around this time at 6 o'clock. Teams can start making things official. And obviously, there are guys who are free agents that everyone's going to have their eye on. And then there's that other option, the trade, the sign and trade type of stuff. Are you more intrigued by those possibilities?
Yeah, outside of Paul George, there's just not any of the real superstar guys that are probably going to move. We've already seen a couple of those guys come off the market. Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, those guys already did extensions and aren't even going to be free agents. So and nobody really expects LeBron to go anywhere, especially not after the Lakers drafted Bronny in the second round yesterday. So what I think you may see is the bigger stuff may come through trade. We may see Zach LaVine get moved. I think Kyle Kuzma is in play. We'll see if Jimmy Butler, what's going on there in Miami, that's now saying he doesn't really want to move, but that doesn't mean the Heat aren't interested in maybe looking at doing something there. So I think you're going to see maybe the bigger names get moved. And what we might see is if Paul George lands somewhere that's kind of unexpected, we may see kind of a domino effect where all of a sudden it is, oh, wait a minute, now there's a lot of guys in play that people weren't really expecting that could start getting moved, because it's generally how these things go.
Yeah, I know. It's funny because I want to get your thoughts on what the Knicks have done and if they closed the gap enough on Boston and how wide the gap is now between the Knicks, Boston, and the rest of the East.
Yeah, they've closed it some. I still think the Celtics are a better team, and by a decent margin. It's funny, somebody was lining them up, and somehow in twisted Knicks fan logic got to, well, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are just as good as Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, which is just that's crazy talk. But, Jalen Brunson's a good player. The Knicks have pretty good depth. The big question with the Knicks right now is, what are they going to do with Julius Randle? Because they got very comfortable playing smaller lineups around one center. Bringing back in Anunoby and adding Bridges gives them the ability to do that. And Randall's a big money player, about $30 million. So that could be something that they could do in trade, because everybody thinks they're probably going to lose Isaiah Hartenstein. He's probably leaving in free agency because they just can't pay him what he makes the offers for. So if that happens, now all of a sudden New York is in a position where, all right, are they going to move Randall and get in even more help? So still moves to come for New York. I think right now, looking at the East, it's kind of Boston, then a little bit of a gap, then New York, Milwaukee. And Philly is just right now, they're just kind of an unknown. But I think by when all is said and done, we can put Philly right in that bucket with New York, Milwaukee, because they're just not going to let this go by without doing something good to put talent around Embiid and Maxey.
Yeah, you say that, and it feels like, man, all the doors are kind of getting shut in their face. Is there, I don't know, a surprise name in a trade that you're like, hey, that guy would make sense? These trades come out of nowhere sometimes where a guy gets moved, but are there some players that you think fit that bill?
Yeah, I mean, I could see, I don't think people are going to run out and start buying jerseys for some of these guys, but I think, you could potentially see them go the DeMar DeRozan route in free agency. Still a really, really good player, even if, people aren't going to be jumping up and down. The Atlanta Hawks are going to do something. Now, Philly's probably not a great trade match for Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, because they already have Tyrese Maxey, and then they just drafted Jared McCain, who, by the way, I love that pick for them. I think he's going to be a terrific player in the league. But they've got other guys like DeAndre Hunter, Bogdan Bogdanovic that are available. Then you get into teams like Utah. Utah has made basically just about everybody but Lauri Markkanen and the couple guys who were rookies last year available. So that's John Collins, Colin Sexton are available, Jordan Clarkson. If you look over at a team like Portland. They're open on just about anybody that isn't Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, and Donovan Clingan, who they just drafted. So that could be Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simon. So there's definitely guys that Philly can get in on and maybe make trades for that might make more sense for them. And then just looking up the road a piece, the Brooklyn Nets are now full-on in transition after trading Mikal Bridges, and there's a belief that guys like Cameron Johnson, maybe Dorian Finney-Smith, maybe Dennis Schroeder, those guys can be had if you make the right offer. And not for Philly, but Ben Simmons is super available, but something tells me the 76ers aren't going there.
Yeah, I don't know that that's going to be a reunion anytime soon there, Keith Smith. Of course, the NBA free agent period is set to start on Sunday night. And, I would say that, Morey, I guess he's got this cap space kind of sitting here. We've talked a lot this week with various people who cover the Sixers. I want to get your thought, who kind of look at the league as a whole. Are they a team that kind of, you go into that, hey, we're just going to overpay it like a Klay Thompson, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and try to get three guys at like an overpay and then try to get back into free agency next year?
Yeah, if we go back to, this probably goes back to when I first started coming on with you all on the show. That's what they did with J.J. Redick back in the day. They had a ton of cap space, and they went out and signed him to a big one-year contract initially. I think it was like 1 year, $19 million, when that was like nearing the max salary in the league, because the thought was, hey, if it's a one-year deal, if it doesn't work out, we just walk away at the end of it, or the guy's even tradable around the trade deadline. So I think you could see them, if they start looking around and saying, all right, we've got $60 million to spend. We don't want to spend it to bring back all of our free agents. There's probably a handful that'd like to see return, but we're going to have more money to spend. They may go to Klay Thompson and say, hey, we know you're looking for the long-term deal, but what about a one-year deal on an overpay for something like 25, 30, 35 million, because they can afford to do that. And then you bring him in, re-sign a couple guys, maybe go out and get a couple other players, and it's maybe not the dream summer that everybody thought, but you probably have a pretty good, deep, versatile roster around Maxey and Embiid, and that's definitely a path I could see them taking.
All right, Keith Smith, it's like the Christmas Eve here for the NBA free agent period. Not quite yet. Tomorrow will be. All day tomorrow. You'll be getting ready. And, of course, at Keith Smith NBA, follow him for all of the NBA news, nuggets, salary cap stuff. Right now, the Sixers, I think they have the most cap space right now.
They do, yeah, because Detroit, who was in front of them, they've taken on a couple contracts over the course of their dealings on the draft. They took on Tim Hardaway Jr. and Wendell Moore Jr., so they have actually now nudged underneath Philly. I've got Philly projected at about $61 million in cap space, which is the most in the league.
All right, we'll see what Daryl Morey does with that when it all opens up 6 o'clock Sunday. Monday, we'll get our first look at what the new look Sixers, I guess, will look like here on the Sports Bash. Thank you, Keith.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Keith Smith, everybody, from SpotTrack.com. They do a great job on the front office show as well, the podcast, breaking down all of the NBA stuff. We're going to be breaking down the NBA stuff on Monday as our Sixers insider, Austin Krell, will join me in studio. We hope that the Sixers have a new look. What can that new look be? Your guess is as good as mine. 609-403 0973. Last chance for happy hour Friday. Suggestions. What are you having on this happy hour Friday? Give me something good. Got injuries to Harper and Schwarber. They're both on the injured list. Phillies and Marlins tonight at Citizens Bank Park. I'm Mike Gill, and this is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
At 5:51, Josh, no big three today. Did you have a big story that you had planned for the big three?
Well, I think one of them had to be the Cam Atkinson news that came out earlier today, which people can read about at 973ESPN.com. I think it's a big deal. The Flyers are getting $5.8 million off their cap. They are putting themselves in a position to have an interesting offseason.
Yeah. Draft tonight, by the way.
Yes, it is.
You all ready to go for the NHL draft?
I got to be honest. I don't even know who half the prospects are, but I'll be paying attention anyway.
I will tell you this. NHL draft, this is what I've been told. The Flyers are trying to trade up. They like the big Russian winger, and they're in the market for a young center to pair with Michkov.
Russians everywhere. Russian take over the Flyers, Mike. Let's
Isn't
go.
that ironic? You know, the Flyers are like the anti-Russian team from, the...
Yeah, they beat the Russian team.
They beat that Russian team, yeah, and that was like the big deal, and then the Russian team left the ice, and then Snyder convinced them to come back, and now they're building their whole team around the Russians.
Although I will say, Steven Stamkos is going to be a free agent. Any interest?
How old is he now? Jeez.
That's a great reaction by you. The look on your face was just so like, wait, what?
I feel like Stamkos has got to be 37 years old.
34.
Okay. Well, he's a little young, way younger than I thought, I guess.
It just feels like he's been around forever.
He has been around for a long time. Yeah, so watch for the Flyers. I know, there was reports that they tried to make a trade yesterday with Carolina, or Columbus?
Columbus.
To get into the number 4 spot.
Right.
Yeah. See, and I'm not telling you I know anything about this hockey class. I know there's the one kid, Celebrini, I think his name is.
I gotta be honest. I don't even know who half these kids are.
Well, the kid Celebrini is the number 1 pick. Apparently he's like on the same level as like a Connor Bedard.
Supposed to be a Connor Bedard-esque player. Yeah.
Yes, but he's not getting the same buzz for whatever reason. So he's going to go number 1. The next thing is, from what I've been told, the Flyers really like the Russian player.
Right.
But from the mock drafts that I looked at, he has been going number 2 in a lot of those mock drafts. So I don't know that the Flyers can get him.
Well, I'll ask Kevin Durso more information coming up tonight on Game On.
Well, and here's the one thing about the Russian player. His name is Ivan Demidov. He has a similar contractual situation as Michkov had. So he would definitively be the second pick in the draft if not for the contract situation. So the Flyers may try to trade up, take him, and go through the same thing.
Because they've already been through it, so why not, right?
What do we need Durso so far? I broke it all down for you.
I want to hear what Durso has to say. That's why.
All right, that's all I got tonight. Happy Hour Friday, everybody.
You got some good recommendations today.
We did get some good recommendations. Well, people just throwing their stuff out there. I like it. I'll be back on Monday. Sixers, free agency. It all starts Sunday at 6. We'll recap it here on the Sports Bash. Have a great night, everybody.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.